In the imperial city, people thought that the Yu clan was the clan with the most mysterious. They handled affairs very discreetly, to the extent that the juniors didn't even know why their clan was so prestigious. They were just used to hearing it said by others. Sometimes the elders would talk about how nobody dared to offend the Yu clan. In the imperial city, people thought that the Yu clan was the clan with the most mysterious. They handled affairs very discreetly, to the extent that the juniors didn't even know why their clan was so prestigious. They were just used to hearing it said by others. Sometimes the elders would talk about how nobody dared to offend the Yu clan. In the eastern part of the city, there was a chain of mountains which were covered with bamboo forests. It was a magnificent landscape. Between two of the mountains, there was a bright green field on which there was a palace and a courtyard built. This was the location of the Yu clan. At that moment, in the middle of the bamboo forest, two people were playing chess. One of them was middle-aged with dashing eyebrows, starry eyes, and he looked majestic. The other one was an old man with white hair, but he still looked vigorous and energetic. "Father, Meng He has been having trouble recently." At that moment, the majestic middle-aged man spoke while making his move. The white-haired old man didn't reply and instead was looking at the chessboard. He looked irresolute, but after a while, he made his move and said, "Even though some pieces are outside of the game, they can still influence its course." The middle-aged man remained silent for a moment while touching various pieces irresolutely without making his move. He then said, "Well, should we allow them to stay outside or should we extinguish the fire?" When the middle-aged man finished talking, he made his move. Considering her temperament, it would be better if she didn't get too infuriated. "Have you ever seen the child?" asked the old man, sounding aggrieved. The middle-aged man nodded and replied, "He's a genius, not much difference between him and Lin Hai. If he works hard, he will become an incredible genius." "It's really an ill-fated relationship," sighed the old man. In his mind, there was an image of a fearless young man. "How's Tian-chan?" asked the old man again. This time, the middle-aged man slightly shook his head and only said one word. "No. Give him some freedom, don't restrain him too much," said the old man while nodding. "Father, how should we handle it?" asked the handsome middle-aged man. The old man remained silent for a moment and then immediately stood up. He gazed into the distance and said, "The event of the decade is quickly approaching. Bring Tianming back, and if Tianming gets angry, speak of the marriage alliance." When he finished talking, the old man left. When the middle-aged man heard the old man, a sharp light flashed in his eyes. He then silently nodded. Those days in the imperial city, the situation was very unstable, which was a great opportunity. They needed to bring Tianming back to the imperial city. In the middle of the peach orchard, Lin Feng was silent. He still couldn't figure out with whom he had connections with. "Teacher, you helped me once again," said Lin Feng to Yan Yu Shangping, who had helped him a few times. "It wasn't me. I was just told to ensure your safety within the territory of the Celestial Academy," replied Yan Yu Shangping while shaking his head, which stupefied Lin Feng. "Who asked you?" asked Lin Feng. "I should take you somewhere," replied Yan Yu Shangping while raising his head. Lin Feng nodded and then only saw Yan Yu Shangping put his zither away, shake his body and immediately jump up into the air. "How fast?" Lin Feng was stupefied. He then stomped his feet onto the ground, condensed some pure qi, and his body shot into the air like an arrow, leaving the bow and rushed towards Yan Yu Shangping, trying to catch up with his speed. Yan Yu Shangping was leading the way and Lin Feng was following behind. They were rushing through the air together. People of the Qi layer could jump 100 meters into the air, while people of the Ling Qi layer could, relying one single jump, travel 1,000 meters into the air, and they were even able to stay there for a very short time. Cultivators of the Xian Qi layer, provided that they had enough pure Qi, could fly through the air. However, cultivators at the lower layers of the Xian Qi layer couldn't fly for long distances, because it required too much pure Qi, especially when moving at high speeds. Yan Yu Ping Sheng was already able to easily fly through the air. Authentically strong cultivators had the power to fly through the skies and destroy mountains. These weren't lies. Lin Feng was struggling to catch up to Yan Yu Ping Sheng, as if he was meticulously being tested, forcing him to use his full strength to keep up. At that moment, under Lin Feng's feet, the pure Qi was scorching hot, just like an intense fire. He didn't stop moving forward, and at the same time, sunlight was penetrating into Lin Feng's body. His entire body was like a burning meteorite. Lin Feng was also extremely quick and closely followed Yan Yupingshang. Lin Feng was the only person who knew just how exhausting it was to keep up for this long. Lin Feng also didn't know how long they flew, but finally, at some point, Yan Yupingshang slowed down and said to Lin Feng, "We've arrived, let's get down." When he finished talking, Yan Yupingshang swooped down to the ground. Lin Feng looked under his feet. There was a magnificent palace surrounded by a tranquil forest, which made his heartbeat accelerate. The Imperial Palace. The place where Yan Yupingshang had brought Lin Feng was the Imperial Palace. Lin Feng looked at Yan Yupingshang on the ground and felt exhausted. Flying through the sky was a great feeling, but it consumed too much energy. The spirit was willing but the flesh was weak. Lin Feng attentively observed the surroundings. It looked like a quiet mountain village. There wasn't only a magnificent and majestic palace, but there were also rivers, mountains, and bamboo forests, just like a microcosm. That place was gorgeous. Lin Feng found the scenery pleasing to both the eye and the mind. At that moment, Lin Feng was a bit surprised. He could clearly perceive that in some dark places, people were staring at them. These were the guards. But Lin Feng felt at ease in the palace. That was absolutely normal. "Let's go in," said Yan Yupingshang as he started walking. Surprisingly, they could freely wander in the manor. There was a stone bridge and many covered corridors. Yan Yushangping seemed to be extremely familiar with the palace. "It seems like teacher's social status is extraordinary," thought Lin Feng while looking at Yan Yupingshang's back. A moment after, Lin Feng and Yan Yupingshang arrived in front of a stream and a forest. Finally, there were some people. Many people wanted to penetrate into the depths of the forest. However, two females were preventing them from entering. Nobody could get in. These young people had no choice but to leave. At that moment, they also noticed Lin Feng and Yan Yupingshang. They couldn't help but look nervous. "Senior Yan Yu, can you take us inside, please?" asked the people walking towards Yan Yupingshang, but he just slightly shook his head and said, "If she's willing to see you, she will." After saying this, Yan Yupingshang and Lin Feng entered the forest. Everybody was stupefied when they saw that, and some people shouted, "Well then why is he allowed inside?" "Because she desperately wants to see him again," replied Yan Yupingshang indifferently. After that, Lin Feng could clearly sense some cold energy piercing his back. They entered the forest. Around them were cliffs and precipices. They were as clear as mirrors. There were also many trees and rivers. Mountains, water, grass, everything was there. The atmosphere was filled with the sounds of the flowing streams and rivers. A gorgeous and splendid silhouette was standing in front of a precipice. She was painting something. Maybe she was too concentrated, but she didn't notice Lin Feng and Yan Yupingshang. Yan Yupingshang smiled at Lin Feng and nodded. Immediately after, he turned around and left Lin Feng there. He didn't have to say anything. Lin Feng already understood. At the moment when he had seen that it was the Imperial Palace, Lin Feng had already thought about it. In the Imperial Palace, there was only one person who was interested in Lin Feng and who could have asked Yan Yupingshang to protect Lin Feng. Of course it was her. Lin Feng walked normally, slowly approached that lithe and graceful silhouette. When he arrived near her, he clearly saw the image in the painting, which abruptly made his heartbeat accelerate. "It's not the same. There is no romantic charm," said a soft and gentle voice. Immediately after, she raised her long and slender hand. She wanted to erase everything. "Am I really that handsome?" interrupted Lin Feng, which made her hand stop in the air. She turned her head and saw Lin Feng. Her cheeks turned red in a flash. However, Lin Feng was staring at the portrait on the wall. Divine, majestic, long fluttering hair. It depicted a free and unrestrained young man. If it wasn't Lin Feng, who else could it be? "Lin Feng, how did you get in here?" asked Duan Xinyi. She had never thought that Lin Feng would suddenly appear. She was pleasantly surprised. "Yan Yupingshang brought me here," replied Lin Feng. Yan Yupingshang had silently brought Lin Feng inside, but Lin Feng still didn't know exactly what the relationship was between Yan Yupingshang and Duan Xinyi. "Oh, no wonder," whispered Duan Xinyi. She knew that Yan Yupingshang was giving her an opportunity. "Xinyi, you and teacher Yan Yu?" asked Lin Feng curiously. "He's my teacher. He teaches me to play the zither," replied Duan Xinyi, which relieved Lin Feng. No wonder Yan Yupingshang could come and leave as he wished. He was the princess music teacher. That was indeed an extremely important position. Other than the young people a moment ago, there were also nobles with close ties to the imperial family who were extremely respectful towards Yan Yupingshang. It was obvious that Yan Yupingshang's social status was extraordinary. Other than the young people a moment ago, there were also nobles with close ties to the imperial family who were extremely respectful towards Yan Yupingshang. It was obvious that Yan Yupingshang's social status was extraordinary. Yan Yupingshang surprisingly favors the princess. Thought Lin Feng otherwise, he wouldn't have brought Lin Feng here to give her the opportunity to meet him again. Lin Feng, I'm leaving, you can head back on your own later. At that moment a very loud voice spread through the atmosphere, and Lin Feng saw a silhouette in the distance. It was Yan Yupingshang. Lin Feng was a bit surprised and smiled wryly while shaking his head. Yan Yupingshang was leaving Lin Feng behind in the imperial palace. Duan Xinyi also looked surprised when she saw Yan Yupingshang leave. She immediately said, Lin Feng, what do you think about my painting skill? The painting has much more charm than I do. Lin Feng smiled. Duan Xinyi's portrait was really splendid. You're just being nice, whispered Duan Xinyi while looking shy. She then pulled Lin Feng and said, Come with me. Duan Xinyi took Lin Feng to a cave. When they arrived near the cave, Lin Feng discovered a place of exceptional charm and beauty. The pieces of furniture were in a picturesque scene. It looked extremely graceful and elegant. A moment after, Duan Xinyi brought Lin Feng into a room inside the cave. Inside there was the sweet fragrance of a young girl. The room looked exactly like a young lady's sleeping chamber. Lin Feng, I live here, I like calmness and tranquility, so I decided to live here. Nobody can bother me when I'm here, said Duan Xinyi in a soft and gentle voice. Immediately after, she pointed to some paintings. When Lin Feng saw these portraits he was stupefied. The entire wall was covered in portraits. All of them were of the same person, Lin Feng. When he saw these portraits, Lin Feng felt his heart tremble. If he hadn't met Meng Qing, then he would have engaged in a relationship with Duan Xinyi, the beautiful princess, without hesitation. Lin Feng, aren't these portraits better than the one outside? Duan Xinyi was looking at Lin Feng with her beautiful and limpid eyes, looking slightly impatient. They are all very beautiful, replied Lin Feng. Duan Xinyi's eyes twinkled. She then pulled Lin Feng towards the edge of the bed and said, Lin Feng, sit down, I want you to taste the tea I make. This? Lin Feng looked embarrassed. That was Duan Xinyi's room, and that bed was the bed in which a princess slept. It even smelt like her. Lin Feng was embarrassed to be pulled onto the bed. Lin Feng, are you still embarrassed about such things when you are with me? Said Duan Xinyi softly. She then immediately started boiling water for the tea. Lin Feng smiled wryly and looked at Duan Xinyi, who looked really clumsy. He couldn't help but smile and shake his head. She was a princess, she probably rarely did such things herself. Lin Feng looked around him while looking at all the portraits of him. He was wondering if Duan Xinyi was thinking about him every day. Xinyi, let me do it, said Lin Feng, walking towards Duan Xinyi, trying to take the cup that she was holding. No need. I can do it, said Duan Xinyi while drawing back her hand. Then water splashed. Duan Xinyi screamed and then the cup fell to the ground. Duan Xinyi wanted to catch the teacup, but Lin Feng grabbed her hand and prevented her from moving. Then the sound of the teacup breaking into pieces broke the silence. However, Duan Xinyi seemed like she hadn't even heard it. She just lowered her head and looked at the palm of her hand. It's just a teacup, it doesn't matter. Pure qi started undulating in Lin Feng's hand, which was holding onto her hand, and started to heal her minor burns. He then opened his hand again. Duan Xinyi was looking at the hand leaving hers and she suddenly felt a bit sad, yet she smiled warmly and gently. Let's go take a walk, said Lin Feng. He found it too strange to stay in Duan Xinyi's room. All right, said Duan Xinyi in a soft tone while nodding. Then the two of them left the cave. Lin Feng, I would like to ask you a question. While leaving the cave, Duan Xinyi had remained silent for a while, and then finally responded. What is it? Asked Lin Feng while looking at Duan Xinyi's strange facial expression. He had the impression that Duan Xinyi was avoiding his eyes. Duan Xinyi looked at Lin Feng, her lips shook. She looked nervous, but she finally found the courage to ask. Lin Feng, that beautiful woman who wears white clothes, do you like her? Lin Feng was a bit dumbstruck. He wouldn't have thought Duan Xinyi would ask him such a question. Yes, I do, nodded Lin Feng immediately. That ice goddess was always silently standing by his side. She was like his own shadow, without asking for anything in return. Everything she did was for him. Even though she was ice-cold, Lin Feng could feel her love. Especially during the times when he was hurt or in danger, Meng Qing became so furious that her body started to freeze. She only cared about Lin Feng's well-being more than her own. Duan Xinyi had always known about her, but she couldn't help it. She looked extremely sad. They remained silent for some time and arrived near a stream and sat down on a stone. Duan Xinyi picked up some small rocks and threw them into the stream, which made the water ripple. Lin Feng, are you going to marry her? Asked Duan Xinyi without restraining herself, while looking at the water ripples. I will, replied Lin Feng resolutely and straightforward. He would of course marry Meng Qing. They really loved each other, so they had to make an official pledge of love. She's really lucky, replied Duan Xinyi in a weak voice. I also want to be with the one I love and stay with him. I want to watch the sunrise and the sunset every day with him. I want to watch the water of the streams flow. Lin Feng was speechless. He obviously understood that the person she loved was him. All these portraits of him made her intentions clear. But I must say it clearly, for the one I love, I can abandon everything, it's not a problem at all, said Duan Xinyi in a low voice, almost as if she was whispering to herself. Immediately after, she turned her head and looked at Lin Feng while smiling in a warm and gentle way. Some people, if they missed an opportunity, had regrets their entire life. Since this was the current situation, why not seize any possibility and chance? Lin Feng, if I abandon my status as a princess, abandon my home, and the status as the first wife, would you accept me? Duan Xinyi's voice was soft, moving and touching. She had the majestic social status of a princess. She could get married with any extremely wealthy or powerful person and millions of people would fall to her beauty. But because of Lin Feng, she was willing to abandon everything, her social status, her home, and even the title of wife, because Lin Feng said that he would marry Meng Qing. In other words, Duan Xinyi was asking to become Lin Feng's concubine. Her love for him was so deep. How could he remain calm? While looking at that beautiful smile, Lin Feng's lips shook. He didn't know what to say, he didn't know what he wanted. If you don't like me in that way, I can just stay by your side and become your servant. I would serve the both of you, continued Duan Xinyi with the same magnificent smile on her face. It was extremely touching and moving. Lin Feng's lips shook, but immediately after, he stretched his hands, put them around Duan Xinyi's shoulders and pulled her into his arms. He then embraced her and pulled her head into his chest. With her beauty, elegance, gentle nature, with such a deep and pure love, Lin Feng couldn't remain unaffected. It was impossible for him not to be moved. Only a cold-blooded animal would remain unaffected by such a pure act of love. The problem was that in Lin Feng's heart, there was only Meng Qing. A while ago, he had actually already secretly decided that he would marry Meng Qing. If he accepted Duan Xinyi, what would he be able to give her? He wouldn't be able to give her anything, but Lin Feng hadn't thought that Duan Xinyi wouldn't ask for anything in return. She just wanted to be near him, even if she became a servant. When Duan Xinyi felt Lin Feng's warm body, she smiled. She looked like a resplendent and magnificent flower. However, even though she was smiling, crystal-clear tears started to flow down her cheeks. Love could be magnificent and wonderful, but it could also be subtle, silent, and painful. Outside of the forest, many people were looking impatient. Outside of the forest, many people were looking impatient. He still hasn't come out, and Yin Yu Pingsheng left a while ago. How come he's not getting the hell out of there? Swore a young man in a low voice. That person was furious. Yin Yu Pingsheng had said that the princess desperately wanted to see him. It really seemed like that was the case. He was inside, alone with the princess. Is there even anyone who knows who he is? Ask someone. All the young people who were there belonged to the imperial palace. They were the children of the imperial ministers or children with noble blood. None of them was a common person. Besides, for many people, Duan Xinyi was the woman of their dreams. She had everything: beauty, charm, and social status. They had been trying to meet the princess for such a long time, but each time they could only wait outside, they couldn't get inside. He definitely doesn't belong to the imperial palace, replied someone. The crowd nodded. If he belonged to the imperial palace, they would have known about him. Since he doesn't belong to the imperial palace, wait until he comes out and we will show him his place, said a cold and evil voice. They were all furious. They couldn't even get inside. Lin Feng was inside and alone with the princess. They were all wondering what was happening. They were enraged. At that moment, in the distance, two silhouettes appeared. When the crowd saw these people, they all calmed down. It was him. The young man leading the way looked cold, detached and serious, giving people the impression that he was already very mature. Behind him was another young man. He looked as sharp as a blade. Is the princess here? Asked the young man leading the way, sounding calm, indifferent and domineering. She's here, but officer, she shouldn't go and bother her, said someone, which surprised the young man. He then looked at his interlocutor and said, What do you mean? When that person sensed the young man's domineering expression, his heart started beating faster. He was surprisingly a bit scared. Shi Qiong was the youngest officer of the Imperial Guards. How inspiring. A guy went in, he's been in there for a while already. I'm just afraid that you will disturb the princess, replied the person again, stupefying Shi Qiong. His eyes looked ice cold. He started walking forwards in the direction of the forest, but as before, he wasn't allowed to enter. Let me in, said Shi Qiong in a low voice, yet sounding domineering and furious. When the crowd saw that, smiles appeared on their faces. Shi Qiong had an extraordinary social status and was extremely talented. He had become the youngest officer in a faction of the Imperial Guards. He was much more outstanding than them. Besides, Shi Qiong also pursued the princess. Unfortunately, Duan Xinyi wasn't interested in him, which upset him. But all of them were upset by the fact that Lin Feng was inside, alone with the princess for such a long time. That time Shi Qiong was leading the way, so they would be able to go inside with him. The princess said it, she doesn't want to be disturbed, said the women blocking the way in a cold tone. If you don't let me in, then don't blame me for barging in, said Shi Qiong, sounding furious. Try and dare. There is nothing that I, Shi Qiong, can't do. Even the second prince, His Highness, said that I could come here as I wish, said Shi Qiong indifferently. Shi Qiong, you are really audacious. At that moment a shout spread through the air. The crowd looked in the direction of the forest and looked embarrassed. It was Duan Xinyi. She looked lithe and graceful. Behind Duan Xinyi was the young man who had been with her all the time, Lin Feng. Lin Feng was looking at Shi Qiong. That young man was very strong from head to toe. He was releasing an oppressive aura. Besides, he just said that Duan Wuya authorized him to come as he wished. Lin Feng was a bit surprised. Xing, shouted Shi Qiong, looking a bit more tender, but immediately after, he looked at Lin Feng in an extremely domineering and aggressive way. His eyes looked ice cold. He then asked, Who are you? Lin Feng didn't immediately reply. He slightly turned his head and looked at the young man behind Shi Qiong. Lin Feng was surprised. It was him. His name is Lin Feng, said that young man who was also looking at Lin Feng. His facial expression was extremely sharp. Lin Feng. The crowd was a bit surprised. Even though some people had never seen Lin Feng, they had obviously heard his name. So it's you, said Shi Qiong while looking Lin Feng up and down. He then said coldly, But you are just an insignificant person, the unimportant Wuxia Marquis. What gives you the right to be standing at the princess' side? Lin Feng was, as before, not looking at Shi Qiong. He was still looking at the young man behind him. That young man was the Blade Master, Lung Yu. Surprisingly, he was there, in the Imperial City behind Shi Qiong. On that day, the one who had saved Lung Yu in Celestial River was probably from the Imperial City. But Lung Yu was a disciple of the Hao Yu sect. What connection did he have with the Imperial City? Shi Qiong, shut up, said Duan Xinyi when she heard Shi Qiong humiliating Lin Feng. She then added, sounding ice cold, I already said it, without my permission, nobody can come and disturb me, and you dare to force your way in. Xinyi, try and understand how I feel in my heart, replied Shi Qiong. Immediately after, he coldly glanced at Lin Feng and said, Xinyi, he's an insignificant Wuxia Marquis. Even though he is not weak and has gained some fame in the end, he is still just a nobody. How can you allow him to enter and pollute you? Mind your own business, I don't need your advice, shouted Duan Xinyi furiously, looking enraged. Are you just going to hide behind a girl? said Shi Qiong while coldly glancing at Lin Feng, who was remaining silent. Lin Feng frowned. Lin Feng knew that if Yin Yu Pingsheng left, trouble would arise. This was the imperial palace and all these young men were aristocrats of the court. They all had incredible social statuses and were all in love with Duan Xinyi. Things were predestined to be difficult. "What do you want?" said Lin Feng while walking forward. His voice was extremely sharp. Shi Qiong and Lin Feng stared at each other. "My name is Shi Qiong, I am an officer of the Imperial Guards. Xinyi is a princess. Here, everybody is an aristocrat of the court, children of imperial ministers, or even of noble blood. You are a simple Qixia marquis, don't you feel ashamed? Besides, what gives you the right to be with the princess? What do you have that we don't?" said Shi Qiong, sounding extremely domineering. Shi Qiong was an officer of the Imperial Guards, and even though he was a bit scared of Duan Wuya and acted extremely polite to him, he had always thought that Duan Xinyi and him were the best possible match. What did Lin Feng think he was doing? "Is that so?" Lin Feng smiled coldly. "You all have very prestigious social statuses, but in the end, none of you can compete with me." "Continue," said Shi Qiong coldly. "If the princess says that she wants to be with you, I will immediately leave," said Lin Feng indifferently, which stupefied Shi Qiong. Immediately after, Duan Xinyi walked towards Lin Feng and held onto his arm. When everybody saw that, they grew even more furious. Lin Feng was right. In Duan Xinyi's heart, there was only Lin Feng. No matter what, they couldn't compete with him on that front. Xinyi, don't believe his sweet words, he is just an insignificant person. He just wants to cling to the rich and powerful, and will obviously never be able to give you anything," said Shi Qiong while looking at Duan Xinyi. He then added, "I, Shi Qiong, will give you everything you want." "Really?" Duan Xinyi was looking Shi Qiong. "Of course," nodded Shi Qiong, sounding resolute. "Well, I want you to disappear from my sight." "Get lost," said Duan Xinyi, sounding ice cold, which made Shi Qiong astonished. Finally, he looked at Lin Feng. If he couldn't change Duan Xinyi's mind, he would just remove his competition, Lin Feng. "Lin Feng, I will give you one chance. If you take the initiative to leave Duan Xinyi, I will not pursue you," threatened Shi Qiong. Lin Feng gradually looked colder and colder. He then said, "Xinyi told you to get lost. What are you still doing here?" "You are courting death," said Shi Qiong. "Really? I don't think so," replied Lin Feng while frowning and holding his head high. These two people were glaring at each other. "You don't think so? Lin Feng, let's see if you can take my punch," said Shi Qiong, sounding evil, which made the other people secretly smile. It was clear to everyone how powerful Shi Qiong was. He was a genius at the third Xianqi layer. If he landed a punch on Lin Feng, he would either die or live as a cripple. "Shi Qiong, you went way too far." When Duan Xinyi heard Shi Qiong, she was furious. He surprisingly wanted to punch Lin Feng. Lin Feng had come to see her and Shi Qiong was causing trouble. Besides, he was getting more and more aggressive. "Shi Qiong, you went way too far." When Duan Xinyi heard Shi Qiong, she was furious. He surprisingly wanted to punch Lin Feng. Lin Feng had come to see her and Shi Qiong was causing trouble. Besides, he was getting more and more aggressive. "Xinyi, I'm doing everything for you. Lin Feng shouldn't be with you. He cannot give you anything, and on top of that, too many people hate him," said Shi Qiong. Lin Feng had even killed Duan Tianlang's son, Duan Han. Shi Qiong obviously knew about those events. Lin Feng belonged to the unwashed masses. He initially had no social status, but then Duan Wuya had conferred him the title of Marquis, which wasn't a very high title compared to them. Besides, he only gave him the title because he could use Lin Feng. Maybe someday he wouldn't need him anymore and Lin Feng would be worthless. He had no background and had many enemies. Lin Feng was unable to protect himself from them. How could he even protect Duan Xinyi? "That's none of your business," said Duan Xinyi in an ice-cold tone. She immediately turned to Lin Feng and said, "Lin Feng, let's go. You need a girl to protect you," joked Shi Qiong calmly. Lin Feng didn't move, he was just looking at Shi Qiong. He looked calm and serene. He needed a girl to protect him? "Lin Feng, ignore him," said Duan Xinyi. When she saw that Lin Feng wasn't moving, she looked anxious. She knew how strong Shi Qiong was. He was the youngest of the 9 Imperial Guard officers. In the entire imperial city, he was one of the most talented cultivators. Lin Feng had great natural abilities, but he was still weaker than Shi Qiong. Apart from strength and natural abilities, Shi Qiong also had a background. Even if Lin Feng injured him while defending himself, the consequences would be dire. Shi Qiong's background was terrifying. Even Duan Wuya had to respect to him. Therefore, because of this, Duan Xianyi wished that Lin Feng and Shi Qiong hadn't met, because no matter what, Lin Feng would lose. However, could Lin Feng ignore it? Shi Qiong humiliated him and said that he needed a girl to protect him. In fact, it was true. If Lin Feng couldn't protect himself, what would he be able to give Duan Xianyi apart from worries and pain? Lin Feng was calmly standing there and looking at Shi Qiong. He then said, "Come and punch me if you dare." Huh. Shi Qiong was stupefied. Lin Feng accepted. Immediately after, he smiled coldly. Lin Feng really had guts. He was begging for death. When the crowd heard Lin Feng, they all laughed. They all thought that Lin Feng was foolish. All the 9 officers of the Imperial Guards were extremely strong. The lowest level required to be an officer of the Imperial Guard was the 3rd Xianqi layer. Shi Qiong was the youngest Imperial Guard officer, who had broken through to the 3rd Xianqi layer. Unfortunately, Lin Feng would not be able to resist. "Very good, you're a real man." Unfortunately, Shi Qiong laughed in an ice-cold way. Lin Feng had accepted. No matter if it was out of courage or foolishness, his punch was aimed to be deadly. Shi Qiong was going to be merciless with his attack. Duan Xianyi looked sad when she heard Lin Feng accept the battle. She didn't say anything. She knew how Lin Feng was. She wouldn't be able to change his mind. He was definitely going to fight. Duan Xianyi coldly glared at Shi Qiong. Shi Qiong also glanced at her and said, "Xianyi, don't worry, I will not kill him." Shi Qiong really didn't intend to kill Lin Feng, but after that punch, Lin Feng would definitely have trouble ever standing back up. He would be crippled. "Xianyi, don't worry," said Lin Feng indifferently while smiling at Duan Xianyi. Duan Xianyi slightly nodded and didn't say anything else. Even though Shi Qiong was extremely strong, Lin Feng was not weak either. Even if Shi Qiong wanted to kill Lin Feng with just a punch, Duan Xianyi didn't think it was possible. She had seen Lin Feng's strength in the lovesick forest. "All right, get ready to be punched," said Shi Qiong when he saw that Duan Xianyi and Lin Feng were looking at each other. He couldn't stand it and released some ice-cold qi. An extremely powerful qi emerged from Shi Qiong's body. Pure qi started fluctuating and a flood dragon illusion appeared around his body. It was incredible. 3rd Xianqi layer. Lin Feng was a bit surprised when he sensed Shi Qiong's qi. Shi Qiong was about 20 years old and already had the strength of the 3rd Xianqi layer. He really had amazing natural abilities. Of course, Lin Feng also knew that the continent was vast. There were a myriad of geniuses. Lin Feng had high natural abilities, but he never said that he was the strongest and no one could beat him. He knew that there were many people who were much stronger than him. Besides, there were also many people who could practice cultivation with much better conditions than him. Those who were noble and wealthy, they had legendary potions, pills and other resources. They have had it all since birth. All Lin Feng could do was rely on his own determination and his power of comprehension to practice cultivation. With great pain and effort, he would constantly improve himself, without ever giving up or stopping. The pure qi on Shi Qiong's body kept undulating and finally condensed around his fist, which made his fist look like a flood dragon. The illusion even emitted a roar while absorbing the powerful qi. Shi Qiong's power is terrifying, thought the crowd when they saw the pure qi flood dragon on Shi Qiong's fist. He looked majestic. If that fist touched Lin Feng, would the dragon swallow him whole? Shi Qiong was not going to show the least bit of mercy towards Lin Feng. "If you want to act like a man, you will have to pay the price," said Shi Qiong with his fist ready to bombard the atmosphere. He was coldly glaring at Lin Feng. Lin Feng would never be able to defend against his punch. He wanted to prove to Duan Xianyi that Lin Feng was not a good match for her. Only him, Shi Qiong, could protect her and be her match. Lin Feng remained silent. Scorching hot flames emerged from his body. It was a deadly fire which invaded the entire atmosphere, making many people back away from Lin Feng. Pure qi fire condensed on his fist and Lin Feng's fist transformed into a blazing sun. "You have broken through to the 1st Xianqi layer. Not bad. Unfortunately, you will not be able to withstand my power," said Shi Qiong with confidence burning in his eyes. A cultivator of the first Xianqi layer couldn't fight back against the strength of a cultivator of the third Xianqi layer. His fist was going to be merciless. Its sole purpose was to crush Lin Feng. Lin Feng ignored Shi Qiong. In his heart, there was no self, nobody, no emotions, only darkness. Besides, in Lin Feng's world of darkness, there was his grim fire. The pure qi on his body kept undulating and rushing towards Lin Feng's fist. The pressure increased. The energy slowly transformed into a pitch-black fire. That deadly black fire was terrifying. It looked abyssal. It was absorbing insane amounts of pure qi from the flames. It was constantly absorbing the strength of the sun, however. Its size didn't change at all. Huh? What kind of fire is that? The crowd was startled when they saw Lin Feng's black fire. Besides, the strange fire seemed to be controlled by Lin Feng. The crowd couldn't feel the deadly qi from the fire. It wasn't as intense as the scorching heat from normal flames. That black fire was extremely calm and tranquil. Shi Qiong frowned but immediately relaxed. Lin Feng had just broken through to the first Xianqi layer. That's all. Even if he knew some special skills, it would be of no use against him. Fool, even if you studied a few skills, you can't do anything. I am much stronger than you. All that you do will be in vain. Basically, you stand no chance of withstanding my punch, said Shi Qiong indifferently. He wanted to see hatred in Lin Feng's eyes. Lin Feng was too calm, which made him feel upset. However, Shi Qiong saw nothing at all in the eyes of Lin Feng. He just looked as calm and serene as before. His pure qi continued moving towards his fist. Flames, darkness, deathly silence. The flame greatly resembled Lin Feng right now, emotionless. Shi Qiong saw that Lin Feng was ignoring him, which made him grow angrier and angrier. Finally, he started walking forwards and his flood dragon roared furiously, as if it was a real dragon. Roar. Shi Qiong's fist bombarded the atmosphere towards Lin Feng. A white flood dragon was rushing towards Lin Feng. At the same time, Lin Feng also moved. His calm and ordinary fist whistled towards Shi Qiong. Then the black fire moved into the atmosphere and the black fire turned into a lotus flower. The atmosphere was then invaded by the terrifying power of the grim fire. This time Shi Qiong's heart skipped a beat. He was surprised. How was that possible? How could that lotus flower have such a terrifying energy? Shi Qiong's heart was brutally pounding in his chest. Everybody was looking at Shi Qiong and Lin Feng's fists as they collided. In an instant the flood dragon was annihilated. It was consumed by the black lotus. It was incredible and thrilling. The grim fire lotus was way too terrifying. It had destroyed Shi Qiong's flood dragon. Shi Qiong had lost. The grim fire lotus was way too terrifying. It had destroyed Shi Qiong's flood dragon. Shi Qiong had lost. Besides, it wasn't over yet. The grim fire lotus continued to move forwards, and that small ball of energy as big as Lin Feng's fist crashed into Shi Qiong's fist. Zirr. Krr. Crackling sounds spread in the atmosphere. Shi Qiong's pure qi collided with the black lotus and immediately dispersed. Nothing could stop the black lotus. Ah! A horrible shriek of agony spread through the atmosphere. Shi Qiong's body was blown back several hundred meters. His face had turned deathly pale. Shi Qiong raised his fist. It was burnt black. His facial muscles were twitching from the extreme pain. He had been too careless. From the beginning, he had assumed that he would be able to cripple Lin Feng's cultivation with a single punch. He had never thought that Lin Feng was able to injure him. After he noticed the terrifying energy of the black lotus, he didn't have the time to dodge anymore. And then that black lotus crashed into his fist and burnt his flesh. When the crowd saw that, they remained silent, especially the noble young men. Surprisingly, Lin Feng had won. They had thought that when Shi Qiong attacked, he would definitely cripple Lin Feng's cultivation, but reality was completely different. Lin Feng had released a black lotus which burnt Shi Qiong's fist. You overestimate yourself, you're pathetic. Even if you say that I can't protect the princess, could you? Joked Lin Feng coldly, which made Shi Qiong feel awkward. His heart was pounding and he was shaking from the intense pain. How excruciatingly painful. That fire was terrifying. Considering his strength, he wouldn't be able to recover from the injury naturally. He would definitely need the assistance of pills. Xian Yi, you should head back. I will leave first, that's alright. I will deal with the nobodies that get in my way, said Lin Feng, turning his head. His voice was soft. Duan Xinyi remained silent for a second and then immediately nodded. Well then, be careful. All right, said Lin Feng while walking. He glanced at the crowd with a cold glare. He looked at the rich and noble cultivators. Surprisingly, they didn't dare make eye contact. They were all worthless. Lin Feng's strength was so terrifying that it scared them. Even though they all had noble backgrounds, what amazed them the most was still extreme cultivation strength. If someone was strong enough, they could reach the heavens and look down on humanity. A single powerful cultivator could have more power than all the great spheres of influence combined. Would he care about these influential nobles? If they provoked him, he would crush them. Lin Feng walked through the crowd and nobody stood in his way. If anyone dared to try, they might end up dying after being burnt by the Black Lotus. Not only did they not obstruct his path, but those noble young men, who had acted in an aggressive way a moment before, were also slightly backing away. That was the way things were when one was recognized as an extremely strong cultivator. Lin Feng didn't even spare these people a glance. He was just calmly and coldly looking ahead. In the direction he was looking, there was Shi Qiong and Leng Yu. Shi Qiong was fixedly staring at Lin Feng with hatred in his eyes. Not only did he not get to show Duan Xinyi his strength, he wasn't able to cripple Lin Feng's cultivation. Instead, he had also been injured by Lin Feng. His face was filled with shame. All of this had happened in front of Duan Xinyi. Shi Qiong was enraged and had killing intent in his eyes. He wanted to kill Lin Feng no matter what. When Lin Feng sensed Shi Qiong's wrath, pure qi started undulating in his hand, and a deadly black fire appeared. But Lin Feng was, as before, calmly walking forwards. He was releasing a terrifying deadly qi. He was moving nearer and nearer to Shi Qiong by the second. Shi Qiong was fixedly staring at Lin Feng approaching. At that moment he had a dilemma. Should he stand his ground and fight, or should he move out of Lin Feng's path? If he fought against Lin Feng, would he be able to survive another Black Lotus? He had already been injured from briefly encountering the Lotus. He already had lost any ideas that he could defeat Lin Feng and no longer thought that he was stronger than Lin Feng. That lotus made from grim fire was way too terrifying. A moment before, the flesh from his entire fist had been burnt black. If that black lotus was aimed at his chest, he would be burnt alive in an instant. But if he didn't fight, could he really open a path? In front of everybody, he, the youngest Imperial Guard officer, would move out of the way because he was scared of facing Lin Feng? If he really did that, the news would quickly spread throughout the city, which would allow the people from the Imperial Palace to humiliate him and make fun of him. Lin Feng was getting nearer and nearer. He was only a few meters away from him. Shi Qiong still hadn't come up with a decision, but while he was still thinking, he heard a voice. Shi Qiong, let Lin Feng pass, said Duan Xinyi. Even though Lin Feng had just won the fight, she still didn't want them to continue fighting. It wouldn't be beneficial for Lin Feng, no matter if he won or lost. When Shi Qiong heard Duan Xinyi, he was surprised. He then turned to Lin Feng and said, since Xinyi says, it's over for today, but I will remember this injury, and I will have my revenge. After saying that, Shi Qiong moved out of the way and let Lin Feng pass. He was happy to hear Duan Xinyi's words. He didn't want to fight against Lin Feng. Lin Feng smiled coldly. He passed by the side of Shi Qiong, then slightly stopped. He then looked at Shi Qiong with a mocking smile as if he found him extremely amusing. He didn't say a word and continued walking towards the exit. When Shi Qiong saw that mocking smile, his mouth twitched and he started shaking. That was the first time that he had ever been so humiliated. Shi Qiong had high natural abilities and people who were as outstanding as him were rare. However, because of his background, even cultivators stronger than himself would not humiliate him. He had never been so humiliated. The woman he loved wanted to be with Lin Feng. She worshipped Lin Feng. He wanted to cripple Lin Feng's cultivation, and in the end, he was injured instead. What made him the most furious was that Lin Feng could have left from anywhere, but he decided to walk towards him, and that was on purpose. Lin Feng was imposing and domineering. He had obviously done that on purpose. Shi Qiong was still filled with fear and had moved out of the way. He even had to endure Lin Feng's mocking smile, a cold mocking smile. He had the feeling that everybody was laughing at him and Duan Xinyi would despise him. Lin Feng passed next to Shi Qiong and continued walking forwards without even turning his head to look back. He looked confident. He had the attitude of a winner. Lin Feng, suddenly shouted Shi Qiong in an ice-cold tone which made Lin Feng stop. He turned around and saw Shi Qiong running towards him. Shi Qiong's flood dragon roared. His entire body seemed to transform into a flood dragon as he threw himself towards Lin Feng. It opened its mouth and an extremely sharp set of teeth could be seen. Lin Feng abruptly turned around and raised his hand. His grim fire was already in his hand. Lin Feng, when facing a cultivator of the third Xianqi layer, remained extremely cautious and vigilant. He was fearless but not arrogant. The black flames moved towards the illusionary flood dragon. Those black flames could burn the world to ashes, so they destroyed the flood dragon. At the same time, Lin Feng sensed an oppressive energy envelop his body. Roar! Shi Qiong kept moving forwards. From his back a gigantic terrifying dragon appeared. It had extremely sharp claws and razor-like teeth. That dragon spirit almost looked like a real dragon as it threw itself at Lin Feng. Shi Qiong had decided to fight against Lin Feng, and immediately released his spirit. Burn! Lin Feng didn't flinch and instead moved towards the dragon. When his grim fire collided with the dragon spirit, the flood dragon was surprisingly engulfed in flames. The two fighters were looking at each other. The power of the dragon and the grim fire were clashing. But at that moment, an incredibly sharp blade energy filled the atmosphere. It was extremely dazzling. Without leaving even a second to react, it moved straight towards Lin Feng. That blade was extremely quick, and was filled with a terrifying blade force. The blade seemed to radiate a multitude of different lights. That energy blade could adopt many different forms, thousands and thousands of different energies combined to create that energy blade. Lung Yu had been condensing energy in his blade for a long time, and was finally attacking. His blade was earth-shattering. Recently the Blade Master entered just like Lin Feng, had broken through to the first Xianqi layer. In the past he had been defeated by Lin Feng, now he had broken through to the Xianqi layer. The Blade Master Lung Yu was continuing to grow stronger. Dodge! When Lin Feng saw that blade moving towards him suddenly, the first thought he had was to dodge. The timing of that blade was perfect. It was an attack aiming for vitals. Lung Yu obviously wanted to kill Lin Feng with that attack. In the past, Lung Yu was extremely arrogant and was considered as the most gifted disciple of the Hao Yu sect. Even though he was only the second best disciple in the sect, everybody thought that it was only a matter of time before he would rise to the top. In the past, Lung Yu was extremely arrogant and was considered as the most gifted disciple of the Hao Yu sect. Even though he was only the second best disciple in the sect, everybody thought that it was only a matter of time before he would rise to the top. Lung Yu was independent in mind and action. No matter where he went, only his blade would accompany him. His blade was worshipped and revered by others. Many beautiful women had openly declared their love for him. However, everything changed after he went to Celestial River and met Lin Feng. His pride had been destroyed by Lin Feng and his prestige now belonged to Lin Feng. If he hadn't been saved at the last minute, he would have been killed by Lin Feng. Therefore, Lung Yu deeply and bitterly hated Lin Feng. Since Celestial River, Lung Yu had been suffering every day and practicing cultivation. He had constantly improved himself and worked to become stronger every day. That was how he had reached his current level at using his blade. With one blade he could condense all the energies from 1,000 blades. His energy blade had reached perfection. Roar! A terrible roar spread through the air. The flood dragon rushed forwards with Shi Qiong to use this opportunity to attack Lin Feng. Lin Feng was still under the pressure from the energy blade. He didn't have any time to waste. How shameless! Shouted Duan Xian Yi to Shi Qiong and Lung Yu, who were suddenly fighting together against Lin Feng. How sly and cruel! Lung Yu was also surprised. Shi Qiong was the youngest Imperial Guard officer, and he surprisingly stooped to such methods to fight against Lin Feng. Besides, he had broken through to the third Xianqi layer, which was 2 more layers than Lin Feng. How shameless! These noble young men were also stupefied. It seemed like Shi Qiong was determined to kill Lin Feng. A moment before, the humiliation had been too great. He couldn't bear it. He needed to kill Lin Feng. Calm! At that moment, Lin Feng's heart was limpid as water. He was so calm that it was scary. The grim fire in his hand was facing the flood dragon. He couldn't use it to fight against Lung Yu. But Lin Feng knew that he had to be extremely precise with his actions. If he made even a single mistake, it would become very dangerous. Lin Feng's thoughts suddenly became extremely calm and tranquil. Everything surrounding him was extremely clear and distinct, the wind, their movements, the blade, everything was clear to him. Lin Feng slightly moved and created several afterimages with his movement. Lin Feng just made an extremely faint move, but his grim fire was still facing the fled dragon. A light flashed, one of Lin Feng's afterimages was sliced in two. That blade had nearly reached Lin Feng, but it was dodged by a hair. Lin Feng could perfectly sense how powerful that blade was. Huh! How quick! When the crowd saw how quickly Lin Feng dodged Leng Yu's blade, they were astonished. It was so close that it almost brushed Lin Feng's skin, but at that moment, his silhouette flickered and an afterimage appeared when he dodged the attack. How incredible, how splendid! Leng Yu was also dumbstruck. Lin Feng, even though he was still facing Shi Qiong, had managed to dodge his energy blade. As expected, Lin Feng was becoming stronger and stronger. But Leng Yu's desire to kill only increased. He raised his blade horizontally. "You want to die?" shouted Lin Feng furiously. In his calm eyes appeared a dazzling light. He stamped onto the ground and a rumbling sound emerged. A crack appeared on the ground and cracks quickly started to spread in all directions. At the same time Lin Feng jumped forwards, the flood dragon was crushed, knocking Shi Qiong a few steps back while Lin Feng's body had spun around in the air, and his black lotus was now moving straight towards Leng Yu. His black lotus collided with the blade and in flash, black flames engulfed the beautiful blade. The grim fire continued to rampage and engulf the blade. The flames quickly started to spread up the blade and instantly engulfed Leng Yu's arm. Ah! Boom! Two sounds emerged in the atmosphere at the same time. The first sound was Leng Yu's agonizing shriek. He immediately dropped his blade. On his body, a pure qi started to fluctuate and rushed to seal his arm, which was engulfed in black flames. However, as before, the black flames continued to rampage and spread further up Leng Yu's arm. His entire arm had turned completely black. It was incredibly shocking. The fire of the Black Lotus was extremely powerful. Even though Leng Yu's blade level was extremely high, he was still extremely far from being a match for Shi Qiong, who had broken through to the third Xianqi layer. Shi Qiong's attack was destroyed and his fist was burnt by the black fire, but this time Leng Yu's entire arm had been swallowed by the flames. His arm was destroyed, it was just hanging loose from his shoulder, he couldn't even feel his arm anymore. It could even fall off and turn to ashes and Leng Yu wouldn't even realize. The second sound was Shi Qiong's attack crashing into Lin Feng's body, which sent him rolling backwards. Lin Feng had turned around to attack Leng Yu. Shi Qiong took advantage of Lin Feng's weakened position to attack again, and his flood dragon bombarded Lin Feng's body, sending him flying. Lin Feng groaned and blood started flowing from his mouth. Lin Feng is monstrously strong, thought people in the crowd. Even though Lin Feng had just been injured from the exchange, surprisingly, when facing two strong cultivators of the Xianqi layer, he wasn't even flinching, especially in front of Shi Qiong, who was at the third Xianqi layer. In such circumstances, Lin Feng had destroyed Shi Qiong's attack, forcing him back and used the opportunity to incinerate Leng Yu's arm. It was amazing. Those black flames were terrifying, they seemed like they could burn anything. Leng Yu, who was at the first Xianqi layer, didn't even stand a chance. The crowd had personally watched Leng Yu's arm burn. Besides, if he hadn't released his pure qi and isolated his arm from the rest of his body, his entire body would have been consumed by the flames. At that moment, Leng Yu was shaking in agony. He lowered his head with his face flushed in pain. He looked at his black burnt arm with a cold stare. Ah! Leng Yu raised his hand, which turned into a blade, and he immediately cut off his burnt arm. The burnt arm immediately fell onto the ground. The crowd was shocked. That move sent shivers down their spines. Leng Yu had cut off the arm, which was engulfed by the flames. How brutal! In order to cut off his own arm, it required a great amount of consideration, as he would never be able to use that arm again. Lin Feng, said Duan Xianyi, running towards Lin Feng's side. When she saw that Lin Feng was deathly pale, she was extremely worried. I'm all right. Lin Feng shook his head, but his weak qi betrayed him. Even though he could rely on his Black Lotus to fight against Shi Qiong, his grim fire was what covered for his lack of strength. Of course, one of Shi Qiong's punches had gravely injured him. Duan Xianyi took out a bottle. It was the same bottle as last time. It contained Xian-level pills of medium quality. Duan Xianyi poured them out and immediately tried to shove them all into Lin Feng's mouth. Lin Feng looked at Duan Xianyi, whose face was covered with worry. He slightly shook his head and said, "Xianyi, with that kind of pill, one is enough." Lin Feng then took one pill, and just like last time, the feeling was pleasant and refreshing. Qi was revolving around his body and his injuries were healing quickly. His qi seemed returned to normal as well. The grim fire was extremely useful. If Lin Feng wanted to make the Black Lotus stronger, he just had to allow the grim fire to absorb all of his pure sun qi and transform it into grim fire. In other words, that terrifying Black Lotus could contain the entirety of his pure qi. A moment before, if Lin Feng wasn't in great danger, he could have put all of his qi into the Black Lotus without needing to protect his body. "Take them," said Duan Xianyi while giving the bottle to Lin Feng. Duan Xianyi looked extremely worried. Lin Feng smiled wryly and nodded. He then accepted the bottle of pills. When Shi Qiong saw how close the two of them were, he pulled a long face. He obviously knew what was in that bottle: Xian-level pills of medium quality, divine healing pills, and Duan Xianyi had given them to Lin Feng because she was worried about him being hurt. When Lin Feng sensed the evil energy being released from Shi Qiong, he pulled Duan Xianyi behind him and raised his head. He then coldly looked at Leng Yu and Shi Qiong. Lin Feng looked like he wanted to make a joke, then said while sounding cold and detached, "I took your punch. After that, you didn't dare to fight against me and instead attacked me when my back was turned. The youngest Imperial Guard officer is so incredible, so amazing, just wow." When Shi Qiong heard Lin Feng, a hideous expression appeared on his face. A moment before, he had actually used a surprise attack against Lin Feng. Leng Yu even helped him. Lin Feng turned around and looked at Leng Yu with killing intent. "Blade Master, this time who will save you?" When he finished talking, Lin Feng started walking towards Leng Yu. Leng Yu, who only had one arm left, started shaking brutally. He was fixedly staring at Lin Feng. This time Lin Feng was going to kill him. Even if Lin Feng didn't plan on killing him a moment before, it was also because Leng Yu hadn't tried to kill him. Lin Feng was furious. Lin Feng wanted to kill Leng Yu. Leng Yu slightly moved back. He looked at Lin Feng. Even though he looked cold, he also looked a bit scared. Leng Yu slightly moved back. He looked at Lin Feng. Even though he looked cold, he also looked a bit scared. In the past, he was unable to defeat Lin Feng. Now both of them had broken through to the first Qianqi layer, while Leng Yu also had the advantage of his blade spirit and an advanced understanding of blades. Amongst the cultivators of the Qianqi layer, he could be considered as a relatively strong individual. However, when facing Lin Feng, he didn't have even a slither of confidence. At that moment, he was unable to compete with Lin Feng. He didn't look glorious at all before Lin Feng. He had even lost one of his arms. Huh. Shi Qiong frowned. He only looked at Leng Yu, who was moving backwards in Shi Qiong's direction. As expected, Leng Yu expected Shi Qiong to protect him. Shi Qiong was intensely staring at Leng Yu. That guy was under his wing. In the future, he would become a useful subordinate. Shi Qiong knew how talented and determined Leng Yu was. He had an extremely advanced knowledge of blades, and he would definitely become stronger. Otherwise, they wouldn't have searched for him and brought him back to the Imperial City. Therefore, Shi Qiong hoped that Leng Yu would stay alive. Shi Qiong would need a few strong and loyal subordinates on the path of cultivation. Even though he had immediately been able to become an officer, he still wasn't strong enough. He wasn't authentically strong. He only managed to impress people by working hard to progress. Shi Qiong moved in front of Leng Yu while staring at Lin Feng. "He's one of my men, you cannot kill him," said Shi Qiong while still staring at Lin Feng. "So what? Are you saying that I can't kill your men?" said Lin Feng, sounding amused. How ridiculous. Shi Qiong was really the laughingstock of the world. Pure qi started to surge forth from Lin Feng. Rampaging flames started to soar around his body, and in Lin Feng's hand, black flames started to burn. It looked incredible. Shi Qiong was fixedly staring at that black fire. He couldn't help but feel a bit scared. He was wondering how Lin Feng managed to condense such a powerful fire. It was perfectly clear to him that Lin Feng had only broken through to the first Qianqi layer, but that terrifying fire could possibly kill him. even though he had broken through to the third Qianqi layer. He obviously knew that Lin Feng's grim fire was terrifying. Lin Feng had also practiced the cosmos burning sun and could absorb the fire essence of the seven-tailed fox, which transformed into pure sun qi. After that, he spent time studying to understand how to use the grim fire. Thanks to the work he had done, he had been able to transform all of his sun qi into the deadly grim fire. How couldn't it become overwhelmingly strong? Even though Lin Feng had just broken through to the first Qianqi layer, he could already absorb the Qian beast fire essence, which allowed him to boost his strength significantly from absorbing the beast fire. He was already much stronger than any normal cultivator who would have broken through to the first Qianqi layer. When Shi Qiong saw that Lin Feng was still steadily walking towards him, his eyes flashed. The atmosphere was invaded by a deathly silence. Only Lin Feng's steps could be heard. Leng Yu was hiding behind Shi Qiong, so Shi Qiong had to bear the incredible pressure. Clack, clack, clack. Just like before, Lin Feng was silently walking. He remained absolutely silent. In the air, it seemed like there was only his oppressive qi and the black fire burning in his hand. A strange deadly energy emerged from Lin Feng's body and enveloped Shi Qiong and Leng Yu's bodies, which made Shi Qiong shiver. Should I move out of the way or not? Shi Qiong hadn't thought that things would escalate to this so quickly. He was confronted with the same decision yet again. Lin Feng was giving him the same choice once again. It was clear to Shi Qiong that Lin Feng wasn't going to be as careless as a moment before. If he didn't move out of the way, it would be extremely unfavorable for him. But if he did, Lin Feng would kill Ling Yu. Actually, a moment before, after Shi Qiong moved out of the way for Lin Feng, he attacked him from behind because he couldn't stand the pressure of living with his humiliation. He felt like everybody was making fun of him and looking at him. They had both attacked by surprise, yet Leng Yu's arm was swallowed by the black flames and he had to cut it off himself. That was the price to be paid for offending Lin Feng. Don't think that I would not dare to kill you where you stand. I killed Duan Tianlang's son as he watched. Even though killing you might have unfavorable consequences, if you continue to push me, I, Lin Feng, will kill you without hesitation and deal with the consequences after you're dead. At the moment when Shi Qiong was still hesitating, Lin Feng spoke. He felt a sense of fear rising in his heart. He was terrified. For a very short moment, he had stopped being scared, but those words had brought the terror back. Shi Qiong hated himself. He wanted to shout furiously, but he was unable to emit any sound. All he could feel was the contradiction between what he wanted to do and what his body was doing. 10 steps, 9 steps, Lin Feng was getting nearer and nearer to Shi Qiong. Lin Feng just had to make a slight jump, and he would arrive directly in front of Shi Qiong. Get lost, said Lin Feng's domineering voice. Immediately after, Shi Qiong's heart started to race and he moved back. In front of everybody, Shi Qiong was moving backwards. 7 steps separated Lin Feng from Shi Qiong. Lin Feng raised his hand and the grim fire was flickering in front of Shi Qiong's eyes. The black lotus was slowly becoming clearer in his vision. Phew, wow! Shi Qiong took a deep breath. He was trembling with fear. He then quickly moved aside. He was unable to stand the pressure for a moment longer. He could only see Lin Feng's calm and tranquil expression. Shi Qiong was scared. He couldn't endure it. That shocked the crowd once again. Shi Qiong had moved out of Lin Feng's way a second time. From that moment on, Shi Qiong's cultivation would never be the same again. His heart would be haunted because of these events. Lin Feng would become the demon in his nightmares. Lin Feng had crushed his confidence. He might never be able to recover from the trauma. Lin Feng and Leng Yu were facing each other once again. Shi Qiong wasn't standing in the way. Lin Feng was releasing a cold energy which enveloped Leng Yu's body and shocked him. Leng Yu was staring at Lin Feng with hatred in his eyes. He hated Lin Feng with all his soul. I already said it, today nobody will save you. An incredible purple spirit emerged from Lin Feng's body and rushed towards Leng Yu. He wasn't using his black lotus to attack. Back! Leng Yu immediately retreated as Lin Feng attacked him. His purple spirit was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye it had already arrived at Leng Yu's body. It then transformed into a gigantic purple dragon which wrapped around Leng Yu. After having broken through to the Qianqi layer, Lin Feng's purple spirit had also changed. It looked even more real than before. It looked like a real ferocious beast. After having broken through to the Xianqi layer, Lin Feng's purple spirit had also changed. It looked even more real than before. It looked like a real ferocious beast. After appearing, the spirit opened its gigantic mouth and stared at the people with its gigantic eyes. It looked bestial and terrifying. Arg! At that moment, the dragon had constricted Lung Yu's body and was staring at him with its ferocious eyes. Lung Yu felt a chill run through his body. He then shouted furiously and released a fierce blade energy which emitted a whistling sound as it sliced through the air. Lung Yu's body was just like a huge blade, slicing the purple dragon. "You still want to live?" said Lin Feng, sounding ice cold. He started rushing towards Lung Yu, who was constricted by the purple dragon. In Lin Feng's hand, there was still a black lotus. "Get away!" shouted Lung Yu furiously when he saw Lin Feng's black lotus. He knew how terrifying that black lotus was. If landed on his body, he would burn to death. However, at that moment Lin Feng wasn't stopping at all. Initially, he didn't feel like killing Lung Yu, but Lung Yu tried to kill him, so of course, Lin Feng wasn't going to show any mercy. Lin Feng raised his hand and was moving nearer to Lung Yu. "Lung Yu is dead," thought the crowd when they saw Lin Feng's black lotus. These two both tried to kill Lin Feng, but in the end Lung Yu would be killed by Lin Feng. "Die," said Lin Feng evilly. "Would you dare?" At the moment when Lin Feng was about to kill Lung Yu, an extremely loud voice spread through the air. Then, an incredible blade energy filled the atmosphere and surrounded Lin Feng's body. Lin Feng had the feeling that he was inside a sea of blades. Behind him was another cultivator at the Xianqi layer, with a blade spirit. The terrifying blade energy was unleashed in an instant. Lin Feng jumped through the air, and at the same time, the light from a blade attack streaked through the sky and cut through the position where Lin Feng was just standing. "Die!" Another blade light streaked through the air and sliced through the purple spirit which was constricting Lung Yu's body. In a flash, the purple dragon roared and immediately after transformed into a countless number of purple snakes, which moved to Lin Feng's side. Lin Feng was standing in the air surrounded by a sea of purple snakes and looked down. The man with the blade was walking towards him. He raised his head and looked at Lin Feng. His blade energy had invaded the entire atmosphere. "We've already met," said Lin Feng, sounding cold and detached. "Indeed we've met," said that person while staring at Lin Feng in the sky. He sounded as cold and detached as he looked at Lin Feng. That person was precisely the person who had appeared in Celestial River to save Lung Yu. He had even attacked Lin Feng with his blade before leaving. Lin Feng didn't know what status he had to bring Lung Yu to the Imperial Palace. "Officer, he has tricked you," said that person while looking at Shi Qiong. Shi Qiong was astonished. "Tricked by Lin Feng? What do you mean?" asked Shi Qiong while narrowing his eyes. "When he uses his fire black lotus, he puts all of his qi into it. When he used his black lotus a moment ago, his qi would have been completely used up and he should only have recovered a fraction of his qi in such a short period. Right now, the black lotus is just for show, it's a bluff, nothing more." That man was looking at Shi Qiong and said slowly, "Officer, he wouldn't be able to defeat you, therefore. He didn't want to fight against you either. He just put enough pressure on you so that you wouldn't fight." After hearing that, Shi Qiong frowned and glared at Lin Feng. "Impossible. Impossible." Shi Qiong's face turned deathly pale. He didn't feel excited at all after hearing that. It was the opposite. He couldn't stop shaking his head. Had he really been tricked by Lin Feng? Lin Feng clearly didn't have the strength to fight against him, but relying on his confidence and persuasion, he had managed to scare Shi Qiong away and crush his pride. How could Shi Qiong ever look people in the eyes again? But when thinking about it twice, maybe the man's words were true. Lin Feng only had the strength of the first Xianqi layer. Using such a monstrous black lotus definitely had side effects. Besides, Lin Feng must have been trying to scare him and impress everyone. Lin Feng hadn't revealed his true colors until now. "Is that so?" shouted Shi Qiong towards Lin Feng. Lin Feng looked at Shi Qiong as if he wanted to laugh, as if the situation was amusing. Indeed, the man was right. He required the entirety of the pure qi within his body to transform his sun qi into grim fire, and then condense the grim fire into a black lotus. A moment before, he had already used his black lotus once and it used an incredible amount of pure qi. Even though he had taken a pill and recovered from his injuries, His pure chi hadn't returned to normal in such a short space of time. Concerning the black lotus in his hand at that moment, it was just for show. It was basically impossible for him to create a real black lotus right after unleashing one. Lin Feng walked towards the man while narrowing his eyes. That the man's strength was weaker than that of Shi Qiong, but he had much more experience, which was obvious considering his age. Besides, he had been watching them since the beginning. Shi Qiong paid attention to Lin Feng's facial expression and his heart started pounding. The man was right. Lin Feng had clearly consumed too much of his qi. He couldn't condense a black lotus that would unleash its full power. He couldn't fight against Shi Qiong. But even when you consider all of this, Lin Feng only used his confidence and persuasion to scare Shi Qiong away from fighting. He had scared him and made him move out of the way. Shi Qiong looked pale and wanted to find a hole to crawl into. As far as he was concerned, all of this was becoming more humiliating for him the longer it continued. Officer, you are extremely young and have already broken through to the third Qianqi layer. You have extremely high natural abilities. Since you want to achieve great things in your life, you must harden yourself and be as determined as ever. You can never allow yourself to stay down. You must welcome difficulty and break free from your mental chains that hold you back. You must have willpower. You need to be determined and tough. All officers must gain experience. It's only way for them to reach the heavens. After all, there is always someone stronger than you, said the man slowly while looking at Shi Qiong. Shi Qiong's soul was shaking as if he had just gained enlightenment. He finally understood what the man was telling him. Even though he continued to be knocked down by Lin Feng, he needed to view it as a challenge and get back up. It was a way for him to gain experience and strengthen his determination. Lin Feng was also looking at the man. That person used a blade. He was a middle-aged man and had already broken through to the second Qianqi layer. He didn't have very high natural abilities, but his heart was like a blade, silent and determined. Thank you for your guidance, said Shi Qiong in a polite tone. His eyes weren't filled with hatred anymore at all. Instead, his eyes were sparkling with enlightenment. In fact, everything in his life seemed to be happening for a reason. He had extremely high natural abilities and a powerful background. On the path of cultivation, he had never experienced extreme difficulties. Even the battles required for him to break through to the next cultivation layer were planned. Those people didn't fight with him to the death and made sure not to harm him. When you look at it from that aspect, Leng Yu was stronger than Shi Qiong. Leng Yu had gone through many difficulties and fought in a number of battles to the death. That's how he was able to break through to the Qianqi layer in such a short time. Therefore, because of these factors, Shi Qiong had run away when faced with the threat of death. He was proud, arrogant, but he still lacked experience, real battle experience. Lin Feng only needed to release a slight pressure to scare him away. Shi Qiong was still very far from being able to achieve something like that. Young master, when you're mature wherever you go, you will be able to adapt, said the man to Shi Qiong. This time he wasn't calling him officer anymore, just young master. From today, I, Shi Qiong, am leaving my function as an officer in the Imperial Guard, said Shi Qiong calmly. He used to be arrogant because of his station as an officer, but what was the point if it was just the title they feared and not him? Could he fight against Lin Feng that way? Shi Qiong turned around and looked at Lin Feng. What has started today is not over, we will meet again. When he finished talking, Shi Qiong started walking away. He was surprisingly leaving. He didn't pay attention to Lin Feng and the others, and he didn't even spare a glance at Duan Xianyi. After what had just happened, he could no longer pursue her affection anyway. He wasn't able to protect her. Many people were astonished when they saw him leave. Then the man also said, "We're leaving too." "All right," said Leng Yu while nodding. He glanced at Lin Feng, but then Lin Feng said in an ice-cold tone, "Leaving? I said it already, nobody will save you today." Huh? The crowd was stupefied. They raised their head and looked at Lin Feng. Was he really planning to kill Leng Yu? Was he even still able to kill Leng Yu? Leng Yu started shaking. The man was also looking at Lin Feng. Leng Yu started shaking. The man was also looking at Lin Feng. You consumed so much of your qi already that it's impossible for you to condense another full-strength Black Lotus. You want to keep us here, but have you thought clearly about the consequences? The man was fixedly staring at Lin Feng. Even though Leng Yu was in a critical position, the man on the other hand, had broken through to the second Qianqi layer, and it wouldn't be easy for Lin Feng to defeat him. I admit that I used up most of my qi. I wouldn't be able to condense another powerful Black Lotus like a moment ago, but I still have the power to kill Leng Yu. Last time you managed to stop me by attacking me with your blade. Past mistakes cannot be repeated, said Lin Feng while staring at his interlocutor. Lin Feng slowly raised his which contained his Black Lotus and said, "Would you bet your life on it? Would you bet your life on it?" That question echoed through the silence of the atmosphere. The crowd looked at Lin Feng. He had confessed that he had used up the majority of his qi, but then told his interlocutor that he would kill Leng Yu anyway. He then dared to ask the man if he was willing to bet his life on the power of the Black Lotus. If he didn't intervene, Leng Yu would die. If he tried to stop Lin Feng, then the Black Lotus would be used against him. The man was fixedly staring at Lin Feng. Would he gamble with his life at stake? For instance, if Lin Feng was bluffing, then the man would have the opportunity to kill Lin Feng in his weakened state. But if Lin Feng's Black Lotus was still powerful enough to kill him, then the gamble would cost him his life. I admit that you are incredibly gifted. I am thinking that we should put the past behind us and build a bridge of friendship. I could send you to a place where you will have incredible privileges. If you went there, nobody in Shui would dare to bully you ever again. When the crowd heard the man, they were all stupefied. He wanted to send Lin Feng to such an incredible place. The crowd obviously understood what it meant and where that place was. It was a special place filled with countless incredible geniuses. But Lin Feng didn't feel that the proposition was interesting. Nobody would dare to bully him again? If Lin Feng wasn't mistaken, Shi Qiong and Leng Yu were also intending to go to that place. If Lin Feng was weaker, then Shi Qiong would still be able to bully him. However, if he was strong enough, would he need to rely on any external help to protect himself? Who would dare provoke him? As before, everything was always reliant on personal strength. The weak would inevitably be bullied by the strong, no matter where they were or what their status may be, whereas the strong could oppress and control the weak. Lin Feng was unrestrained, natural and carefree. He wanted to soar into the heavens and do whatever he wanted. Then nobody would dare to humiliate him. But he also perfectly understood that the world was cruel. The only way to achieve what he wanted was to become incredibly strong, becoming stronger step by step until he reached the heavens. He longed to soar into the heavens more than anything else. He longed to be able to fly beyond the clouds and look down on the world from above. Just like an incredible hero, he wanted to be able to kill his enemies with a wave of his hand. That way, nobody would ever dare to bully him. If anybody dared, they would die. Those days, Lin Feng's strength was extremely far from soaring into the heavens, but at least he could already prevent a great number of people from humiliating him. In Celestial River, Leng Yu had been extremely arrogant and tried to kill him, and now in the Imperial City, Leng Yu once again made an attempt to kill him. If Lin Feng didn't kill Leng Yu, his heart would never be peaceful. He had to kill Leng Yu so he could rest easy. "I'm sorry, I'm not interested," replied Lin Feng. He then summoned the purple dragon spirit again, and an incredible purple energy appeared around him. He looked like a ferocious beast. Lin Feng's refusal astonished the man. Lin Feng wasn't interested. It was the third time that he had ever heard of someone refusing to go to the Holy Land for cultivators. 18 years ago, 2 other people also refused an invitation. One was the genius Zhuge Wuqing, but the man didn't know name of the other person. All he knew was that cultivator had a dual spirit. Back then, the man was still young. He hadn't even broken through to the Qianqi layer at the time, and wasn't able to go to that place. Ever since he had access to that holy land, nobody had ever refused an invitation. Everybody wanted to get the chance to go there more than anything. Yet Lin Feng just refused. Not only did Lin Feng only take a second to decide, but he also started to focus on Leng Yu again while ignoring the man. Lin Feng moved forward. His body was surrounded by his purple spirit. He raised his hand which contained the Black Lotus and walked towards Leng Yu. Leng Yu was shaking. He thought that he had managed to escape by the skin of his teeth. But in the end, Lin Feng was still going to kill him. Leng Yu looked at the man as he was Leng Yu's last hope. He only hoped that the man would be able to defeat Lin Feng. The man had told Leng Yu that he was going to become a legendary cultivator in the future. How could his legend end here? He couldn't die. Lin Feng, are you sure? Do you know what you just refused? Besides, do you know whom you are trying to kill? threatened the man while fixedly staring at Lin Feng. I don't know, all I know is that I will kill anyone who tries to kill me, replied Lin Feng indifferently. Do you know the name of the Snow Dragon Guards, the protectors of Shuiyu? Shouted the man furiously when he saw that Lin Feng was refusing his offer. The man had shouted aggressively and loud enough to frighten anyone, including Lin Feng. Snow Dragon Guards? Lin Feng was astonished. He had never heard of them. He only knew that Lu Tsonglan was the only person protecting Shuiyu for the last decade, and in the end, he was sentenced to death for it. In Lin Feng's eyes, the Snow Dragon Guards were nothing but a joke. What Lin Feng didn't know was that the Snow Dragon Guards were also the most mysterious of all the armies. They were amongst the strongest soldiers in the entire country. The people who were able to become an officer of the Snow Dragon Guards was revered and respected. Ling Yu is already set to join the Snow Dragon Guards in the future. If you kill him, you'd kill a recruit of the Snow Dragon Guards, continued the man when he saw that Lin Feng stopped. Lin Feng had stopped in the air and was looking at him. His eyes sparkled and his lips moved as he then said, "What do the Snow Dragon Guards have to do with me?" Then Lin Feng's purple spirit burst through the air and in a flash, it was already tightly wrapped around Lin Yu. That move had shocked everybody. What did the Snow Dragon Guards have to do with Lin Feng? The purple dragon roared. Deadly chi filled the air and the crowd saw spirits start to move. Lin Yu's body was still tied by the purple dragon, which lifted him into the air. He was completely unable to move. Lin Feng raised hand, which was surrounded by black flames, and attacked Lin Yu with all his cruelty. Ah! A gut-wrenching scream of agony exploded in every direction and painfully pierced into everybody's ears. Black flames had engulfed Lin Yu's body, which burned every inch of his flesh. The purple spirit was still in the air. It was still tying Lin Yu's body, but at that moment, there was nothing remaining but ash. Lin Yu was burnt alive. The only thing left of him was the gut-wrenching scream, which was still echoing through the atmosphere. Lin Feng was standing there with his grim fire surrounding his hand. He looked cold and emotionless. Of course, he didn't even feel a tinge of pity. He turned around and looked at the man once again. The man was also staring at him coldly. I already said today nobody will save him. You saved him once, I wouldn't let it happen twice, said Lin Feng while looking at the man. I have already killed him. Do you still want something? Do you still want something? Lin Feng asked the man because he was trying to stop him from killing Lin Yu, but he still killed him, so what did the man want by staying? At that moment in Lin Feng's hand, there was still a black lotus, but it wasn't as black in color anymore. It didn't look as powerful as a moment before anymore. The man's facial expression changed a few times. Lin Feng was asking him what he wanted. What could he do? He had attached a great deal of importance to Lin Yu for a long time. He had event brought him to the Imperial Palace. Lin Yu was destined to become a Snow Dragon Guard. However, Lin Feng hadn't shown the tiniest shred of mercy and burnt Lin Yu alive. The Snow Dragon Guards, the protectors of Shuiyu, what did they have to do with Lin Feng? The protectors of Shuiyu were under the control of the Duan clan, that's all. Lin Feng wasn't a fool. He wasn't going to become a servant of Shuiyu or for the Imperial clan. You will regret what you did today, said the man while staring at Lin Feng for a while. He had killed a future member of the Snow Dragon Guards. Besides, he even offended Shi Qiong. Lin Feng would definitely have to pay the price for his actions. If you want to fight, I will fight. If you don't want to fight, scram already, said Lin Feng, who ignored the man's superfluous words. Lin Feng had heard the same idle threats from everyone he crossed. They always said that he would regret his actions. But in the end they were just words. He never felt the slightest regret as he was always acting in harmony with his principles. If he wanted to fight, then Lin Feng was willing to fight him. If he just wanted to run his mouth, the man should scram. If he wanted to fight, then Lin Feng was willing to fight him. If he just wanted to run his mouth, the man should scram. Lin Feng was standing in the air and looked at the man with a piercing look. If he had doubts about Lin Feng's strength, he could fight here and now. He could gamble and see if Lin Feng still had the strength to fight him. The man glanced at Lin Feng and immediately after glanced at Duan Xian Yi. He immediately made a decision. No matter what the situation was, Lin Yu was already dead. He had been killed by Lin Feng and that couldn't be changed. If he fought and Lin Feng still had strength to fight, Lin Feng would definitely kill him. If Lin Feng didn't have the strength to fight anymore and was just bluffing, if he really consumed all of his qi, could the man even kill Lin Feng? Could he ignore Princess Duan Xinye's feelings and kill Lin Feng? He couldn't forget that Lin Feng was part of Duan Wuye's faction. If Shi Qiong was strong enough, he could have killed Lin Feng, but the man could not take the same action, otherwise he would end up being punished. Therefore, he quickly decided that it would be best to leave. Lin Feng would regret it in the future. "We will meet again," said the man to Lin Feng, sounding cold. Immediately after, his silhouette flickered and vanished without trace, which astonished the crowd. Shi Qiong, Ling Yu and the man were three extremely strong cultivators of the Xianqi layer, and they all wanted to cripple Lin Feng's cultivation, and some even wanted to kill him. But the result was Shi Qiong and the man had escaped while Ling Yu was burnt alive. They had finally realized that the young man whom Duan Xinye liked so much was more mysterious than they could imagine. His natural abilities were much more frightening than they had first thought. Lin Feng turned around and glanced at the crowd with an ice-cold glare. Immediately the people in the crowd felt their hearts start pounding. After that, the crowd quickly dispersed and left. Once the crowd was gone, Lin Feng floated down to the ground. He took a deep breath. He no longer had a sharp expression. He just looked exhausted. Exhausted. Lin Feng had pushed himself to the point of exhaustion. He had condensed his pure qi to unleash the full power of his Black Lotus twice. He almost no pure qi left. Lin Feng could barely raise his hand. If the man had attacked him, Lin Feng wouldn't have stood a chance. That man was much more terrifying than Leng Yu. "Lin Feng," said Duan Xinye while moving next to him. When she saw that Lin Feng looked deathly pale, she started to feel guilty. Lin Feng had ended up in this position because she selfishly wanted to see him again. "Don't worry, I'm all right," said Lin Feng softly to Duan Xinye, after which an adorable expression appeared on her face. She was hiding her sadness of not being able to marry him. "No need to fly back, I will accompany you to the exit," said Duan Xinye to Lin Feng. Lin Feng slightly nodded and said, "All right, let's walk through the palace." The imperial palace was gigantic. It seemed like an endless landscape. There were 7,200 large residences, 3,600 dining halls, an innumerable amount of ordinary halls and people. There were even more than 4,000 mountains and 300 rivers within the territory of the palace. The imperial palace was like a small world within the world. Besides, considering all of this, the imperial palace was extremely calm and tranquil. It was surrounded by mountains and rivers. Beautiful bridges were built over the lakes. The high mountains had rivers peacefully flowing down. Every now and again there were people who could be seen taking a walk through the scenery. Of course, other roads also led to vast plains where Lin Feng could see people fighting. Some of these battles were arranged to test their strength, while others were actual dangerous battles. When the people saw Duan Xinye, they were surprised. Duan Xinye was surprisingly walking alone with a young man. Duan Xinye looked soft and gentle. She looked like a young girl in love. This news would quickly spread through the imperial palace. Lin Feng was also casually looking around. "Lin Feng, can you see over there? It's called Wuya Mountain. That is where my brother Wuya lives." At that moment, Duan Xinye was pointing at a distant mountain. The landscape was breathtaking. The foot of the mountain was emerald green and rivers were twisting through the lush greenery. It was extremely beautiful. Besides, on the tip of the mountain there was a small palace. On the edge of the palace, there was a large waterfall flowing from the mountain to the river below. Such beautiful scenery! Lin Feng sighed in amazement. Lin Feng had just thought that everything would be gigantic and imposing in the imperial palace. But while walking through the different places, he understood its the unique beauty and magnificence that it held. Living there was indeed something marvelous, especially in the locations where Duan Wuya and Duan Xinye lived. The places where they lived were breathtakingly beautiful and tranquil. Duan Wuya lived in a breathtaking mountain scenery, while Duan Xinye lived in a tranquil forest with a stream. "It is great indeed, but I will not get to see it in the future," said Duan Xinye, who sounded a bit sad. But then immediately her sadness turned into a smile. Did such scenery really matter? The most important thing was that she would get to be with Lin Feng. At that moment, Duan Xinye felt a hand next to hers. Lin Feng started to hold her hand with his warm and gentle hand. Duan Xinye shivered and looked at Lin Feng. He was looking at her with a resplendent smile on his face. Duan Xinyi beautifully smiled while looking at Lin Feng. Duan Xinyi also started to hold onto Lin Feng's hand. The sun was radiating its light down onto these two bodies, a talented and handsome young man, walking hand in hand with a beautiful noble girl with the beautiful scenery in the background. The scene was like something only told in stories. Lin Feng was smiling warmly. Duan Xinyi was walking with him and holding his hand so that everybody would know that Lin Feng and Duan Xinyi were together. One can only imagine the kind of pressure Duan Xinyi was under. She was a beautiful young woman, she was a princess, but for Lin Feng she would abandon her status, her family and her right to live in the imperial palace, only to be with him. She felt an uncontrollable yearning for Lin Feng. Would he ever disappoint her? At that moment in the mountains beside a waterfall, two people appeared. Just like Lin Feng and Duan Xinyi, these two people were a handsome young man and a beautiful woman. When these two people saw Lin Feng and Duan Xinyi, they were a bit surprised. What a beautiful woman, thought that young man when he saw Duan Xinyi. She looked precious and elegant, just like a lotus flower in blossom. She had a beautiful smile which radiated from her face. The beautiful girl by his side was a fellow disciple. She was exceedingly beautiful, but she still couldn't reach Duan Xinyi's beauty. Immediately after, the young man slowly turned his head and looked at Lin Feng. He had the feeling that he had already seen Lin Feng in the past, but he could not remember him. Have we met him before? Asked the young man while frowning. The young girl was looking at Duan Xinyi. She hadn't even paid attention to Lin Feng. Duan Xinyi was very beautiful, which made her feel slightly uncomfortable, especially since her fellow disciple was looking at her in such an ambiguous way a moment before. When the young girl heard her fellow disciple, she turned to Lin Feng and also had the same feeling, as if she had already seen Lin Feng somewhere, but she couldn't remember where. In the air, an eagle cried out and then landed beside the young man. When Lin Feng and Duan Xinyi heard the call of the eagle, their attention was drawn in that direction as well. At that moment, they both raised their heads and looked at the place beside the waterfall. Lin Feng frowned and a dazzling light flashed through his eyes. It's him. Lin Feng's eyes looked extremely cold. Even though he had never seen them before, judging from their descriptions and the eagle, he had guessed who they were already. On that day he returned from Celestial River to Yangzhou City. As he rushed towards Yangzhou City, two silhouettes had appeared atop an eagle. He only had time to see them fly away into the distance. When Lin Feng had arrived in Yangzhou City, he saw that these people had crushed Lu Tsonglan and Lin Feng statues and killed the Qixia soldier that were on guard. They were extremely cold-blooded and savage. They said that if Lin Feng wanted his revenge, he could find them in the imperial city. Lin Feng could still remember his name. Ling Tian. Ling Tian noticed Lin Feng's cold glare and felt a cold chill of killing intent. Ling Tian frowned hideously when he noticed this. Ling Tian was sure that he had never seen Lin Feng, but he looked extremely familiar. He had long forgotten about the statues and the slaughter of some insignificant guards. Ling Tian, what's wrong? At that moment, in the sky above the waterfall there was soft and gentle voice. Immediately after, Duan Wuya appeared to their side and saw the two silhouettes in the distance. Surprisingly, it was his sister Duan Xinyi and Lin Feng. However, Lin Feng and Ling Tian didn't look like they were on good terms. Your Highness, who are those two people over there? Asked Ling Tian to Duan Wuya. Duan Xinyi was a graceful, elegant and gorgeous young woman. He wanted to know who she was. Also, Lin Feng was looking at him in an extremely cold way, and was surprisingly releasing killing intent with his glare. Ling Tian also wanted to know who he was and why he recognized him. Your Highness, who are those two people over there? Asked Ling Tian to Duan Wuya. Duan Xinyi was a graceful, elegant and gorgeous young woman. He wanted to know who she was. Also, Lin Feng was looking at him in an extremely cold way, and was surprisingly releasing killing intent with his glare. Ling Tian also wanted to know who he was and why he recognized him. The young woman is my sister, Duan Xinyi, said Duan Wuya, which surprised Ling Tian. Her Majesty the Princess. No wonder that she looked so elegant, graceful and beautiful. I already heard that the princess was extremely beautiful, but this exceeds my imagination. She's extraordinarily beautiful. said Ling Tian, who revealed the thoughts in his mind. Duan Xianye's beauty profoundly affected him. It's just, who's that person with her? I don't know him, said Ling Tian while looking at Duan Wuya. Lin Feng and Duan Xianye were walking hand in hand together, and their silhouettes were becoming clearer as they moved closer. Ling Tian had the feeling that he knew Lin Feng, and his intuition was growing stronger. He had never seen Lin Feng but still had a very familiar impression. Am I imagining things? Thought Ling Tian, but immediately after, he refuted this idea. As a cultivator, his senses were extremely acute, especially after he broke through to the Shanqi lair. He couldn't be wrong. He is, said Duan Wuya, who initially wanted to speak. We already encountered each other, said a voice suddenly interrupting Duan Wuya. Ling Tian saw that Lin Feng was fixedly staring at him. Lin Feng's eyes looked as cold. Lin Feng was able to hear what Duan Wuya and Ling Tian were saying from so far in the distance. You seem extremely familiar, said Ling Tian while looking at Lin Feng, and then added, but please forgive me, I can't remember where I have met your excellency in the past? As expected, he can't recognize me, thought Lin Feng. Ling Tian didn't remember him. In Yangzhou City he had destroyed the statues. Lin Feng didn't care about that. What he cared about was the dozens of lives that had been lost because of Ling Tian's arrogance. These soldiers were all killed because someone wanted to pick a fight with Lin Feng. You've never seen me face to face. It's also the first time that we have met in person, but I could never forget you. Lin Feng's voice was ice cold, and he then said, the place we encountered each other, it was in Yangzhou City. Yangzhou City. Ling Tian frowned. Yangzhou City was only a small city. He didn't remember much about it. He only knew one person that was associated with it. It's you. Ling Tian was stupefied and then looked at Lin Feng in a cold way. He remembered the name on the statue, Lin Feng. It seems like you remember me now, said Lin Feng, sounding cold and detached. In the Imperial Palace, he had seen Lang Yu, and now he even encountered Ling Tian. However, he was within Duan Wuya's palace. The Imperial Palace was a complex place. Ling Tian, Lin Feng, it seems like you know each other. You don't need me to introduce you then, said Duan Wuya when he saw Lin Feng and Ling Tian were furiously glaring at each other. He couldn't help but speak in a gentle voice and smile. He wanted to soften the atmosphere. But they were already enemies. Could a few simple words possibly change the situation? Of course, it was impossible, especially since Lin Feng and Ling Tian's conflict was based on blood. A few dozen soldiers had lost their lives. Could Lin Feng just forget that? The two of them were aggressively staring at each other, like predators. The young girl on Ling Tian's side was looking at Lin Feng as well. It seemed like that Marquis of Yangzhou City wasn't as simple as she believed. Surprisingly, he was with the princess. It also seemed like Duan Wuya was extremely friendly with him as well. Initially, she thought that Duan Wuya was just the person who granted Lin Feng with the title of Marquis. She didn't think that they had a relationship. But Lin Feng probably couldn't be compared to Ling Tian. She knew how gifted and talented Ling Tian was. He was infinitely stronger than her. Now that they came to the Imperial City, everybody would know them sooner or later. The entire city would admire them. They were destined to become the names on everyone's lips. Xianyi, what are you and Lin Feng doing here? Asked Duan Wuya when he sensed that atmosphere was a bit strange. This time he was talking to Duan Xianyi. Duan Xianyi looked at Duan Wuya and said, I'm sending Lin Feng off as it is his first time coming to the Imperial Palace. Alright, you should leave, said Duan Wuya in a soft and gentle tone. He didn't want Lin Feng to stay there. Apparently, there was a conflict between them, so Duan Wuya didn't want them to end up fighting each other. Duan Xianyi pulled on Lin Feng's hand. Lin Feng obviously understood what Duan Wuya meant as well. He was looking at Ling Tian. Lin Feng had already used up a lot of energy at that moment. Fighting right now wasn't an option. Besides, he couldn't afford to not give face to Duan Wuya. After all, Duan Wuya's strength and power were inconceivable for Lin Feng. Also, Duan Wuya was constantly helping Lin Feng, and he appreciated their friendship. Duan Wuya was extremely friendly to Lin Feng. Lin Feng didn't want to cause problems for him. Duan Wuya as an enemy would be terrifying. He was also Duan Xianye's brother. Lin Feng obviously didn't want to get into a conflict with him. Therefore Lin Feng wouldn't fight Ling Tian there. I came to the imperial city, said Lin Feng towards Ling Tian, which made Ling Tian narrow his eyes. He of course knew what Lin Feng meant. Back in Yangzhou City when he left, he said that if Lin Feng wanted revenge, he could come and look for him in the imperial city, and Lin Feng had come. So what? Replied Ling Tian. He looked extremely proud and arrogant. Ling Tian had dared to destroy Lin Feng's statue and kill some of Lin Feng's army. He was fearless all the way. For him Lin Feng was nothing, a simple marquis, nothing more. In front of him these people he had killed weren't considered geniuses, so they were just insects, nobodies. You will pay for shedding the blood of my brothers, said Lin Feng, looking calm, but his insides were boiling. A few insects are dead, so what? They were useless, said Ling Tian with disdain. He was humiliating the guards he killed. A few insignificant insects, nothing more. How could Ling Tian care about them? Concerning your revenge, I said already, if you want to get it, come and find me, we will fight. Of course, I hope you're strong, because I will not show mercy to the weak, said Ling Tian in an extremely arrogant tone, looking down on Lin Feng. When Lin Feng was starting to gain his reputation, Ling Tian decided to go to Yangzhou City and destroy Lin Feng's statue. What gave a nobody like him the right to have his own statue? Besides, Lin Feng was with the elegant princess. Ling Tian hated Lin Feng even more from that moment, or more precisely, he was jealous. Be patient, said Lin Feng, and then started walking away. He was leaving with Duan Xinyi. Lin Feng and Duan Xinyi soon disappeared into the distance. Duan Wuya stayed behind with the two people. Duan Wuya was annoyed. How did he not have any information about Lin Feng and Ling Tian being enemies? I will wait, thought Ling Tian. Lin Feng was threatening him? It had been a long time since somebody had dared to threaten him. Since Lin Feng was making him wait, he would look forward to seeing what would happen. A trivial Qixia marquis, nothing more. He just cared about not making Duan Wuya lose face. Otherwise he would have immediately attacked Lin Feng. Lin Feng, why are these people your enemies? Asked Duan Xinyi while walking slowly with him in the imperial palace. She couldn't help but ask, she was too curious. Initially there was no enmity between us, we didn't even know each other. They didn't know me, but they came to Yangzhou City, destroyed the statues of Lu Tsonglan and me. If it had just been that, it would have been alright, but they also killed some of my personal soldiers and shouted a message to the entire city. Everybody was to tell me that if I wanted my revenge, I should come look for them in the imperial city. When Duan Xinyi saw that Lin Feng was releasing a cold energy, she held Lin Feng's hand even tighter and smiled to him in a gentle way. She looked at Lin Feng and said, in our world, many people will try and crush another person's pride by killing the people associated with them. They are extremely talented, monstrously strong, and think that they are at the top of the food chain. For them, the lives of a few normal people do not mean much. When Duan Xinyi saw that Lin Feng was releasing a cold energy, she held Lin Feng's hand even tighter and smiled to him in a gentle way. She looked at Lin Feng and said, in our world, many people will try and crush another person's pride by killing the people associated with them. They are extremely talented, monstrously strong, and think that they are at the top of the food chain. For them, the lives of a few normal people do not mean much. Duan Xinyi perfectly knew that Lin Feng was carefree, sometimes aggressive and cold. He showed no mercy to those he killed, but in his heart he still had compassion. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so angry that a few soldiers had lost their lives. On the continent, there were many people who were kind-hearted, honest, and exceptionally gifted. They didn't like killing people, however. Once they experienced the coldness and cruelty of the world, these honest and kind-hearted young people had no choice but to take up the sword to kill. Lin Feng had also gone through a similar conflict in his heart. Heaven and earth were cruel. They treat all creatures as straw dogs. Even Lu Tsong had these feelings. But the most important thing is that your heart doesn't change. If your heart stays the same, my heart will forever be yours, said Duan Xinyi with a sweet smile on her face, as if she was trying to calm Lin Feng down. When Lin Feng saw Duan Xinyi's smile, he smiled softly. Actually, as a princess, Duan Xinyi was constantly witnessing people using plots and machinations against each other. But Duan Xinyi's smile was pure and soft, because she didn't allow anything to pollute her heart. Lin Feng stretched his other hand and gently caressed her face, which made her blush. She had the feeling that her body was on fire, and she slowly lowered her head. I will always stick to my principles, said Lin Feng slowly as if he was declaring his intention. No matter how cold he was or how many people he killed, he always stuck to his principles. Lin Feng, my brother's friends are extremely gifted. They all have extremely important backgrounds. Ling Tian and that young woman must be extraordinary people if they were able to draw my brother's attention. You have to be careful, said Duan Xian Yi while raising her head. People who could come to Wuya's mountain were all exceptional individuals. I understand, nodded Lin Feng. He wanted to kill Ling Tian, but it didn't mean that he was going to act carelessly. Ling Tian and that girl rode a Xian-level ferocious beast. They were arrogant and proud. Their strength had to be incredible as well. Besides, they could curry favor from Duan Wuya, which proved to Lin Feng even more that they were not ordinary people. In order to kill them, Lin Feng still needed to become stronger. Duan Xian Yi and Lin Feng continued to chat as they walked for a long time. Without even realizing it, they had already left the Imperial Palace. Around the Imperial Palace, there was a long river and a beautiful forest. In the middle, there was a large road. The people entering and leaving were very few. At the moment when Lin Feng and Duan Xian Yi were leaving the Imperial Palace, they only saw a few silhouettes, and there was also a motionless carriage as it had been waiting for someone. The few people present were all amazed when they saw Duan Xian Yi. They all looked at her in an extremely respectful way and everyone bowed to her. They were also looking at Lin Feng with eyes filled with curiosity. Duan Xian Yi didn't care about them wondering who Lin Feng was. But when Lin Feng and Duan Xian Yi arrived next to the carriage, it was still motionless. There was only one person leaning against the side. They could see that person's back. He was carrying a sword. He looked sluggish and had his eyes closed. You two are really slow, suddenly said a lazy-sounding voice. He slightly moved and then turned around. That young man looked at Duan Xian Yi and Lin Feng. He had beautiful feminine eyes and was smiling indifferently. When Aoshue, Lin Feng was stupefied. But immediately after, the surprise disappeared from his face and he also smiled. Long time no see. When Aoshue smiled as well, and immediately after, he stood perfectly straight and released an extremely sharp energy which suddenly invaded the entire atmosphere. Lin Feng was surprised. Then the young man with his feminine beauty started moving towards Lin Feng with a strange expression on his face. Lin Feng was stupefied. Then Lin Feng's eyes flashed with a dangerous light as well, and he moved to intercept Wen Aoshue. Sword, whispered Wen Aoshue. He raised his finger, which became as sharp as a sword as it started absorbing sword energy. It looked swift and fierce. Son, said Lin Feng at the same time. He also stretched his finger out towards Wen Aoshue. His finger contained his sword chi as well as his scorching sun chi. Thur. The terrifying energies were clashing in the air. Lin Feng and Wen Aoshue's fingers collided and a cyclone of power burst out. Lin Feng's body was projected back 2 steps, while Wen Aoshue was still standing in the same place looking at Lin Feng. Xian Qi layer, smiled Lin Feng. They hadn't met for a while and it seemed like Wen Aoshue had also broken through to the Xian Qi layer, but Lin Feng wasn't surprised. It was actually very normal. At the time when he joined the Celestial Academy, Wen Aoshue's cultivation level was already higher than Lin Feng's. Even when they joined the war, Wen Aoshue's cultivation level remained higher than that of Lin Feng. In such a short time, Lin Feng had learnt the basics of alchemy, and had learnt many skills such as the surplus souls technique, and on top of that he broke through to the Xian Qi layer. Wen Aoshue had high natural abilities, so it was normal for him to eventually break through to the Xian Qi layer. Lin Feng could understand things better than most people because of his surplus souls and his earth fusion. Because of this he was stronger than most people. However, Lin Feng couldn't be described as an incredible and unparalleled genius yet. When Aoshue, Shi Qiong and even Leng Yu all were geniuses in their own right, they weren't any less gifted than Lin Feng. Of course, this was just in reference to cultivation abilities. In terms of fighting capacity and combat effectiveness, Lin Feng was much more advanced than most people. He had only broken through to the first Xian Qi layer, but was able to kill cultivators at the second Xian Qi layer. Indeed, I am at the Xian Qi layer, but I just came back and heard that you are now the top-ranked disciple of the Celestial Academy. That doesn't make me feel relieved, but it doesn't matter. Why did you give me face a moment ago? Smiled Wen Aoshue. A moment before, when both of them had displayed their respective strengths, he had already lost in power, but Lin Feng didn't use all of his strength. The scorching hot energy disappeared at the very last second, before it collided with Wen Aoshue's finger. Then Lin Feng had meticulously moved backwards. All of this was to protect Wen Aoshue's face. "Were you waiting for me here?" asked Lin Feng while smiling. He was curious, why was Wen Aoshue waiting there? They hadn't seen each other for a while, and surprisingly, when Aoshue was there with a carriage, it really seemed like he was waiting for Lin Feng. "Indeed, I was waiting for you," said Wen Aoshue while nodding, which surprised Lin Feng. How could Wen Aoshue know that Lin Feng was in the imperial palace? And on top of that, why was he waiting for him? "Teacher told me to come here to wait for you. If Xian Yi is with you, nobody would cause you trouble in the imperial palace, but outside of it, you can rely on me to stop people causing trouble for you," explained Wen Aoshue while smiling at Lin Feng when he saw that he looked perplexed. "Teacher?" Lin Feng looked startled. Duan Xian Yi and Wen Aoshue seemed to be really close. "Lin Feng, Aoshue is my fellow student," said Duan Xian Yi to Lin Feng while smiling, which surprised Lin Feng. He had finally understood that's how it was. When Aoshue and Duan Xian Yi were fellow students, Lin Feng obviously knew who their teacher was. Yin Yu Pingshang. But this time our teacher made a mistake. Many people caused trouble for Lin Feng when he was in the imperial palace, said Duan Xian Yi while smiling wryly. Yin Yu Pingshang had planned everything to the last detail, but there were certain aspects which were overlooked. Caused trouble? Xian Yi, even though you were with him, some people dared to attack Lin Feng? Asked Wen Aoshui with his beautiful eyes filled with confusion. Lin Feng came across Shi Qiong, said Duan Xian Yi. Shi Qiong. When Aoshui's pupils shrank, no wonder. If Lin Feng had encountered Shi Qiong, it would go badly because he was madly in love with Duan Xian Yi. Shi Qiong wouldn't care about giving face to anybody. Shi Qiong didn't cause too much trouble for Lin Feng, did he? Asked Wen Aoshui, puzzled. Considering Shi Qiong's temperament, he wouldn't let Lin Feng off. Duan Xian Yi shook her head and smiled. Then she heard Lin Feng say slowly, "We fought, nothing came of it." "You fought?" asked Wen Aoshui calmly while frowning. Lin Feng had said it in a very relaxed manner, but Shi Qiong was incredibly strong. Surprisingly, Lin Feng was saying that the two of them fought each other. "Yes, after the fight he left," said Lin Feng as if it was absolutely normal. He then turned to Duan Xian Yi. "Yes, after the fight he left," said Lin Feng as if it was absolutely normal. He then turned to Duan Xian Yi. "Aoshui and I will go together from here, you should head back." "All right," said Duan Xian Yi while nodding in a cute way, but she tightly gripped onto Lin Feng's hand. She felt reluctant to leave him. She said, "Be careful." "Don't worry," said Lin Feng while smiling in a tender way. Immediately after, their hands slowly separated from each other. Duan Xian Yi then walked back while turning her head now and then, as if she was afraid that Lin Feng would run away and never come back. Lin Feng had made her a promise, but she was still scared to lose him, because she cared so much about him. She was terrified by the idea of losing him. Lin Feng was smiling the whole time. Only when Duan Xian Yi's silhouette completely vanished from his view did Lin Feng turn his head around. At that moment, when Aoshui's facial expression looked ambiguous, he had a smile yet not a smile on his face. They hadn't met for a very long time, but Lin Feng had already broken through to the Xianqi layer. He had become the top student of the Celestial Academy. He was worshipped and revered by many people, and he even obtained the princess heart. Lin Feng was really enjoying a good life recently. "Why do we have a carriage?" asked Lin Feng, which made the ambiguous smile disappear from Wen Aoshui's face. Lin Feng looked at the carriage. He wasn't a woman yet when Aoshui had brought a carriage to pick him up. "Who knows, you might have wanted to elope with the princess, so I brought a carriage," said Wen Aoshui while laughing, which made Lin Feng roll his eyes with exasperation. He ignored Wen Aoshui and climbed onto the carriage. When Aoshui sat in the front of urged on the horses with the whip as they started trotting slowly. "Where were you all this time?" asked Lin Feng as he sat next to Wen Aoshui on the front of the carriage. "I was at the 9-Dragon Mountain chain at the peak of Mount Sword," said Wen Aoshui. "There I closed my eyes for a while and managed to break through to the Xianqi layer. I was successful in my training." 9-Dragon Mountain chain. Mount Sword, whispered Lin Feng. In the east of the imperial city, there was a vast mountain range with many ferocious beasts. It was a bit like the Black Wind Mountain. It was an extremely large region, and on the other side of the mountain chain was a neighboring country. Lin Feng had also heard that the powerful Yu clan lived in a forest within that mountain chain. When Ao Shui had mentioned the Mount Sword, it was one of the high peaks in that mountain chain. Yes, practicing sword skills at Mount Sword is great. I improved so much on my path of sword cultivation. You should also go there when you have time, explained Wen Ao Shui. In the imperial city, strong sword cultivators particularly like to go to Mount Sword to practice their sword skills. But rumors said that it wasn't good to go there too often. For a sword cultivator, the best time to go was before breaking through to the next layer, or when one was on the verge of understanding something new regarding swords. Going there too many times would have the opposite effect and cause one's path to become harder. Of course, that was just a rumor. Let's go then, said Lin Feng suddenly, which shocked Wen Ao Shui. What now? Asked Wen Ao Shui while glancing at Lin Feng with his beautiful eyes. Yes, now, said Lin Feng while resolutely nodding his head. When Ao Shui was stupefied, he stared at Lin Feng and remained frozen in place, overcome with confusion. You're insane. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have told you, said Wen Ao Shui upset. Immediately after, the horses were charging forth at full speed. The wheels of the carriage were rolling at incredible speeds across the ground. The carriage was moving towards the east at full speed. The imperial city was an incredibly gigantic place. When Ao Shui was driving the carriage at full speed through the imperial city, but they managed to arrive after only a day of travel. When Ao Shui stretched while looking at the gigantic mountain chain filled with ferocious beasts. When Ao Shui looked exhausted, not because of training hard but because he had been driving the carriage at full speed for an entire day. He was breathing deeply. He was really exhausted. When Ao Shui saw Lin Feng jump from the carriage and look at the mountain range with twinkling eyes, he looked excited. It was the first time that Lin Feng had gone to the Nine-Dragon Mountain chain. It also had many ferocious beasts just like the Black Wind Mountain, but there were still some differences. In the Black Wind Mountain, the slopes were filled with trees, and their topography also differed because in the Black Wind Mountain, there weren't many precipices. Besides, the topography of the Nine-Dragon Mountain chain was extreme. There were huge variations in altitude between the different mountains. However, they both contained terrifying ferocious beasts. Therefore, the thick qi from the beasts filled the atmosphere. Even though it was filled with ferocious beasts, there were many people who journeyed to that mountain. Ferocious beasts were very dangerous and their forests were extremely dangerous places. Hunting and fighting ferocious beasts were a great way to accumulate battle experience. So cultivators would constantly risk their lives by fighting against ferocious beasts. They hardened themselves and strengthened their determination by fighting against ferocious beasts. At the same time, in beast forests, cultivators could also find rare treasures. Therefore, practicing in a beast forest was extremely dangerous, but there were many people who went there anyway. Where is Mount Sword? Asked Lin Feng. Go straight for about 5 kilometers, you will see it, explained Wen Ao Shui. Immediately after, he added, I just came from there, so I won't be able to accompany you. We will have to part here. When he finished talking, he immediately turned around and jumped back onto the carriage. Then, he used his long whip to urge the horses on as the sound of the carriage departing filled the air. It wasn't long until he was gradually disappearing into the distance. Lin Feng watched Wen Ao Shui leave. What a likable person. He looked strange, feminine and handsome, but he acted natural, unrestrained and unruly. Wen Ao Shui was also extremely gifted. He was a man of unyielding character, but he wasn't reckless at all. He always stood head and shoulders above others. He wasn't scared that people wouldn't know how strong and prestigious he was. Very quickly, Lin Feng turned around and walked into the mountain range. He intended to practice and improve his level. After all, in the imperial city, Lin Feng had a lot of enemies. If he wanted to fight against people like Shi Qiong and if he wanted to kill Ling Tian, he only had his own strength to rely on. Therefore, when he heard Wen Ao Shui say that this place was ideal to improve a cultivator's sword abilities, Lin Feng had immediately decided to come without the slightest degree of hesitation. Cultivation was something that had no set or defined end, and could be practiced without end. Lin Feng was already able to carry out sword fusion, but he hadn't mastered it yet. He was far from it. Besides, There had to be much stronger dimensions than that on the path of the sword. It's just that Lin Feng hadn't uncovered them yet. The sun was shining upon the thick and dense forest. Only a few rays of light could pierce through the dense vegetation. Feng Ting was walking through the forest with the greatest of care. Around her were some guards from her clan to protect her. Xiao were already about 5 kilometers inside the mountain. If we keep moving forwards, we might encounter some extremely strong Ling-level beasts. We have to be extremely careful, said an old man next to Feng Ting. Yes, I know, said Feng Ting while nodding. Even though she was scared, she had to continue. Her father was sick and she needed to find some 9-sun grass. Xiao, if you can't do it, let's give up. Your father will not blame you. Finding 9-sun grass is extremely difficult, said the old man while sighing. 9-sun grass contained an incredible amount of sun qi. It contained the incredible vitality of the sun. It only grew in places where pure qi was extremely dense. Only places which were connected to the qi veins of the earth could grow 9-sun grass. That kind of treasure was so precious that even if they found it, there was a good chance that it would get stolen by someone stronger. Feng Ting slightly shook her head. She would never give up. 9-sun grass. Precisely at that moment, Lin Feng was passing nearby, and heard these 3 words which drew his attention. The grass was a Ling-level ingredient. It could heal someone's respiratory system, and even strengthen it. It could increase the strength unceasingly. Besides, it was also one of the ingredients of divine water pills. Lin Feng hadn't forgotten that Yun Shi, who was frozen, needed 9-sun grass to keep living. Lin Feng frowned while looking at Feng Ting and the guards surrounding her. They seemed to take their function of protectors extremely seriously. There were some other people who were looking at that girl in an evil and perverted way. They harbored evil designs. That young girl looked lithe and graceful and had developed curves. She couldn't sense the looks from those evil people, but with Lin Feng's acute senses and experience, he easily noticed them. But Lin Feng was a stranger. Would he be able to take care of her? He made a slight movement and instantly arrived by the girls' group, which surprised the guards, who then stared at him with murderous gazes. Who are you? Asked the old guard who was in front of Feng Ting. He was of course very vigilant in the 9-dragon mountain chain. A few extremely strong cultivators killed the weaker ones to steal their precious treasures. It was an extremely common phenomenon. Therefore, if anybody suddenly appeared before them, they would have to be extremely careful. Do you know where to find 9-sun grass? Asked Lin Feng towards the girl. Feng Ting observed Lin Feng. He looked clean, mysterious and handsome. No, I don't, said Feng Ting while shaking her head. She had come hoping to encounter it by luck. Lin Feng didn't add anything. He only wanted to know if they had information on the 9-sun grass. Let's work together, how does that sound? Said Lin Feng after remaining silent for a moment. He wasn't familiar with this place. If he could really find some 9-sun grass and improve his sword skills, he would definitely spend some more time in the 9-dragon mountain chain helping with their search. Let's work together, how does that sound? Said Lin Feng after remaining silent for a moment. He wasn't familiar with this place. If he could really find some 9-sun grass and improve his sword skills, he would definitely spend some more time in the 9-dragon mountain chain helping with their search. Such an opportunity was extremely rare. Feng Ting remained silent and ignored Lin Feng's question, and then Lin Feng heard the old man next to her say, "No need, sorry, we don't need each other. It would be best if we go our own ways." Indeed, besides, why would you want to stay with us? Who are you? Said a guard sounding nervous. Lin Feng rolled his eyes and released a cold energy which astonished the crowd. They felt like they were going to freeze on the spot. How cold? They all quickly went silent. Since that is the case, I will go, said Lin Feng while slightly shaking his head. If the young girl had agreed to stay with him, that would have been great for her. If Lin Feng was with her, then she wouldn't be in danger, but she stayed silent. Lin Feng quickly continued on his way. Feng Ting's eyes twinkled. How straightforward. Such people were rare to find. Lin Feng had come and asked if she knew where to find 9-sun grass, and on top of that had asked if he could go with them. Besides, he had remained absolutely unperturbed when they rejected his offer. Lin Feng continued walking forwards and suddenly accelerated, rushing deeper into the mountain. A wolf had noticed that some people had penetrated its territory. and let out a low howl while running towards Lin Feng. Suddenly, the light from a sword glowed and the wolf's head was pierced as it fell onto the ground. It had become a corpse. Besides, Lin Feng's silhouette immediately vanished from that location. The wolf wasn't the only one to end up like that. After that, many ferocious beasts attacked Lin Feng, but it was all in vain. They didn't even manage to slow Lin Feng down. Lin Feng was streaking through the forest just like a meteor as he killed ferocious beasts. He looked majestic. After a short period of time, Lin Feng came out of the mysterious forest and stopped. In front of him there was a tall mountain peak. It was so high that it looked like it was a pillar that supported the sky. What amazed Lin Feng the most was that the mountain surprisingly looked like a sword. Its peak looked like the tip of a sword. It looked like it was cutting through the heavens. Mount Sword. It was a mountain chain of 9 sword-shaped mountains. That was Mount Sword. Lin Feng was stupefied. Then his silhouette started flickering insanely towards a mountain peak facing the 9 sword mountains. From that mountain peak, this angle was the best for observing them. He would be able to differentiate between each mountain. No wonder when Ao Shui told Lin Feng to walk straight into the depths of the 9-dragon mountain chain and after 5 kilometers later he would see. And indeed, that was the case. Anyone, when seeing these 9 lofty mountains, would have known that they were Mount Sword. But there were really some wonders created by nature. Surprisingly, the earth had created 9 lofty mountains which resembled swords that looked like they were cutting through the heavens. How extraordinary! What mighty swords! Finally, Lin Feng arrived at the foot of the mountain and stood on a gigantic rock on a steep slope. He then calmly looked at the 9 sword mountains. He needed to concentrate a great deal to see as far as their summits so he could see the entire sword. How domineering! Lin Feng raised his head and looked at the summit of the mountains. In front of him there were the 9 gigantic swords. They looked domineering. They could pierce the earth and the sky. It was extremely impressive. No, I can't. Being domineering doesn't play an important role at all in my sword path. That mountain could really benefit swords which contained a domineering aura, but it's not appropriate for my sword. I cannot let the sword path in my heart be influenced. Lin Feng was thinking deep in his heart. He gradually emerged from his thoughts. Indeed, if a cultivator had just started practicing the sword and randomly absorbed that sword energy and improved it, they would become much stronger. However, Lin Feng's sword already had its own path. His sword was almost alive and had its own type of energy. He couldn't carelessly follow any sword path. He wouldn't necessarily become stronger. On the contrary, it could actually hinder his current path and cause great harm to his future advancements. What Lin Feng needed was a pure heart that followed a clear path. Because he was able to absorb some of the energy from these mountains, it could influence the sword path in his heart. At the foot of the mountain, not far from Lin Feng, there was a silhouette brandishing their sword over and over again. It was becoming stronger with each movement. It contained a domineering energy as if it contained the strength of the mountains. Exactly as I thought, simply observing the Mount Sword will not make anyone advance. It's not that simple, whispered Lin Feng. Without the slightest doubt, that person's sword was becoming stronger with each movement and was filled with a domineering energy which was growing stronger as well. As expected, that cultivator had been learning from the swords of Mount Sword, but it contained the chi of Mount Sword. But, did he really understand swords? Maybe practicing that way and studying the sword energy of these mountains could help them be outstanding for a short while, but in the end it was hollow. An authentic sword cultivator didn't need to study the sword energy of other sword paths. What they needed was to understand their own sword energy, and only then could they walk down their own sword path. This was the only way it would benefit their future progress. Let's switch the angles, maybe there will be a difference, said Lin Feng. Immediately after, he flew towards the east at full speed. He was constantly flying around and once in a while, he was turning his head and looking at the mountains. Lin Feng didn't stop flying higher and higher. The higher he was, the more he realized that these mountains were magnificent. It seemed that no matter where a person went, none could escape from them. When Lin Feng looked at a sword mountain not far from him, he had the impression that the sword was on his side. Lin Feng didn't stop flying higher. In his field of vision, there were now all 9 sword mountains. They looked smaller and smaller, but they were still filled with an incredible sword energy. When Lin Feng stepped on the top of a mountain, Lin Feng was stupefied. At that moment he was higher than the 9-sword mountains. It was incredible. He was looking down at the 9 swords. How powerful, it almost looks like they're coming at me, thought Lin Feng. All the 9 swords seemed like they were moving to kill him. A person's strength can't exceed the laws of the universe, no matter how strong you are. There is always someone who can surpass you in the end, said Lin Feng to himself, looking down at these 9-sword mountains. At the moment when Lin Feng was standing at the foot of the mountain, he was looking up at these mountains and had the impression that they were incredibly domineering. It looked like they were attacking the heavens. But while standing at the top of another mountain and looking down on these 9 mountains, his heart was filled with lofty sentiments. Maybe everybody that came to study the energy of these mountains had different experiences and different ways to improve their sword path. Lin Feng had first looked up at them and now he was looking down on them. Every sword cultivator trusts their sword. Cultivators are determined to constantly improve themselves, but to do that, they need an incredible courage, and only then could they stand above everyone else looking down. Lin Feng didn't stay looking at the top of Mount Sword for long. A short while after he went down again. Then he started to repeatedly go up and down the different mountains while observing the 9-sword mountains from different angles. Lin Feng kept doing that for 3 days. In 3 days, he had seen the 9-sword mountains from every possible angle. Finally, on the 4th day, Lin Feng came back to the top of that mountain where he could observe them and sat down cross-legged. In Lin Feng's hand appeared a brilliant sword light. He condensed it to create a pure qi sword. In Lin Feng's hand appeared a brilliant sword light. He condensed it to create a pure qi sword. Lin Feng slowly used the sword in his hand to practice his movements. The sword had slowly risen into the air like the rising sun of a new day. It was filled with vitality. Lin Feng's sword abruptly stopped halfway in the air. Lin Feng had stopped his movement and started to frown. My sword of the rising sun requires the energy of the rising sun. Even though it is full of vitality, its killing potential is much too weak, thought Lin Feng. Immediately after, he condensed another sword and he started the movements again, but it still had the same weakness. This time, Lin Feng was only practicing his sword skills and wasn't using deadly energy or battle energy. Combining multiple types of energy could strengthen the explosive power of a sword, but it wouldn't help Lin Feng break through another layer of the sword dimension. After having reached a certain sword level, it was necessary to understand one's own true nature. Only a pure and unadulterated sword could help a sword cultivator progress on the path of sword cultivation, because each sword contained its own energy. Lin Feng condensed another sword, and so on, as if he had forgotten the passage of time. He didn't even stop to breathe. All he was focused on was his sword. It's slower now, impossible, even though it has the qi of the rising sun. It's still too slow, I can't kill anyone with that. This one is too quick, it doesn't resemble a rising sun. It seemed like there was a flaw and Lin Feng couldn't find a balance. At that moment he suddenly stopped. He didn't condense another sword and instead he looked at the 9-sword mountains in the distance. He seemed pensive and lost in thought. The 9-sword mountains looked very similar, they all had the shape of a sword, but they didn't look entirely the same. From different angles Lin Feng got a different impression, especially from above and from the foot of the mountains. When he was looking up at the mountains, Lin Feng had the impression that the swords were piercing the heavens. When he looked at the mountains from above, they looked unstoppable, as if they were coming for his life. The same swords gave completely different feelings. The same swords but different feelings. Lin Feng was stupefied, his eyes twinkled. He looked at the sun again, it was gradually rising in the sky. It was becoming more and more dazzling as it moved higher into the sky. The sunlight was also becoming more and more powerful. Another sword appeared in Lin Feng's hand. Without any hesitation, Lin Feng started his movements again. The sun was actually illuminating Lin Feng. Besides, a sun pattern had distinctly appeared on Lin Feng's body. When using his Cosmos Burning Sun skill under the sunlight, Lin Feng felt like his entire body was filled with an endless strength and power, as if he gained the power of the sun. His sword started to move again. It was dazzling as it illuminated the atmosphere. A thunderous rumbling sound spread through the atmosphere and they all originated from the top of the mountain on which Lin Feng was standing. Lin Feng was in absolute immersion with his sword. While practicing sword cultivation, his heart couldn't be distracted by anything else. The only thing he had in mind was his sword. Sword cultivation. In the distance, at the foot of the mountain, Feng Ting and the others were gazing into the distance. When they looked at the top of the mountain, they were all astonished. How strong! I wonder who that prodigy is. He has an extremely advanced knowledge of swords, whispered Feng Ting. She could only see the dazzling light of the sword of the rising sun. It was even more dazzling than the real sun above them in the sky. Even though she was very far away, Feng Ting could still sense the destructive power that the sword contained. The sword cuts in the mountain left her feeling extremely puzzled. Those who were with Feng Ting were also all staring at the top of the mountain. Each and every single one of them was astonished. They all wished that they would one day be that strong. When such a sword appeared, the earth and the sky looked colorless in comparison. The only reason they were able to look at it for such a long time was because they were so far away from it. If they had been near it, they probably wouldn't even be able to keep their eyes open. Boom! 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 Feng Ting and the others almost fell to the ground, which stupefied them. What's going on? Asked Feng Ting in a low voice. Immediately after, thunderous rumbling sounds unceasingly invaded the atmosphere. The ground beneath their feet was even shaking. What's going on? What is happening? Feng Ting and the others didn't dare to make a move. The ground was unceasingly shaking under their feet, as if the earth was about to crack open. It was shaking more and more intensely with each passing second. What was going on? They all had a massive amount of sweat on their foreheads. They had never experienced such a strange phenomenon. The entire ground seemed like it was going to collapse under their feet. They raised their heads and saw that the mountain was also shaking. It was terrifying. Feng Ting and the ones accompanying her weren't the only people in the area. There were other people practicing their sword skills. At that moment they had all stopped and were all astonished. Gigantic boulders were falling down the slope of the mountain. It was emitting a rumbling noise which filled the atmosphere. But the most terrifying part was that, in front of them, the 9 sword mountains were violently shaking and breaking apart. The ground continued shaking more intensely throughout the entire area. Everyone was panic-stricken and had all stopped whatever they were doing. They were all dumbstruck. Beasts were roaring, neighing and howling and going insane as they ran away from the source of the tremors. Only Lin Feng was left at the top of the mountain practicing his sword cultivation. He was in full immersion with his sword dimension. The world around him could explode and fall apart, but he would remain focused on his sword. In his heart there was nothing but his sword. Lin Feng was in the sword dimension studying his sword. It seemed like he had forgotten about the rest of the world and forgotten the time. According to rumors, those who could penetrate into the dimension of earth fusion had an incredible understanding and could reach their moments of enlightenment more easily. That rumor wasn't wrong. Lin Feng was precisely in fusion with the earth and having a moment of enlightenment. An incredible sword energy emerged and oppressed the atmosphere across several hundred kilometers as it rose into the sky. That incredible sword energy filled the sky. It was unceasingly growing stronger as the energy spread over a larger area. Several hundred kilometers around the mountain, all the retreating ferocious beasts no longer dared to move an inch and every cultivator had turned deathly pale. How was such a thing possible? How could such a powerful sword energy appear in Shuiyu? That sword energy could destroy the heavens. Gotcha! It seemed like that sound came from the sky. That sword energy which rose into the sky was growing even more terrifying. The 9 mountains started shaking even more and looked as if they were going to collapse. In the territory of the Yu clan, an old white-haired cultivator, who was practicing his cultivation, abruptly opened his eyes when he sensed that incredible sword energy. His facial expression drastically changed. Oh no, this is bad. He howled furiously and then jumped into the air, smashing a hole through his roof. He then gazed into the distance in the direction of the 9 sword mountains. It seemed like there was a sword in the sky. A sword made completely from energy. Sweat started to drip from the old man's forehead. The seal was going to break. Who was trying to break the seal on the evil sword? In Shuiyu, those who understood the 9 Dragon Mountain chain the best was the Shuiyu clan. In Shuiyu, Those who understood the Nine-Dragon Mountain chain the best was the Shui clan. The Yu clan knew exactly why the Nine-Dragon Mountain chain had its name. It was a blurry part of the history of their clan. According to the rumors, there were 9 ordinary mountains where extremely strong sword cultivators went to practice their sword skills. And these strong cultivators had carved these mountains into 9 mountains which were shaped like swords. But only a core disciple of the Yu clan would know that these 9 swords mountains had that shape because one of their ancestors fought against an extremely strong sword cultivator. It had been a tremendous battle. That extremely strong sword cultivator refused to die and burned his soul strength with an incredible pressure which turned his sword into an evil sword. He then used that evil sword to severely injure the ancestor of the Yu clan, almost killing them. In the end, the ancestor of the Yu clan and another extremely strong cultivator of that time acted together to suppress that evil sword and divide it into 9 parts of power, which they named the 9 dragons. They are also the 9 sword mountains. From that moment, only the strongest cultivators of the Yu clan, who lived in a forest about 50 kilometers away from the 9 sword mountains, knew the truth. On the horizon, black clouds were starting to gather. When the old white-haired man saw these evil clouds, he heaved a sigh. He didn't know exactly when the evil sword was sealed, but at that moment, it seemed to be emerging once again, and he didn't know if it was a fortunate or an ominous event. In Shuiyu there was surprisingly someone strong enough to break the seal of the evil sword and attract it to him. Only a genius who had broken through to an incredible level of the sword dimension could have achieved such an incredible feat. The old man was wondering who that person could be. That person had surprisingly broken through to an incredible layer within the sword dimension. It was clear that they were already extremely advanced on their path of sword cultivation. Their natural abilities would also be considered terrifying. Fine, why do I need to think so much? The seal has been broken, that might not necessarily be a bad thing, thought the old white-haired man while looking at the black clouds on the horizon. His sharp facial expression gradually turned into a relaxed expression. He didn't care, everything that was fated to happen would happen. At that moment, the 9 mountains were shaking more and more violently. In the air, black clouds covered the sky. Sunlight was obstructed and darkness had invaded the mountain chain. An extremely terrifying and oppressive qi was covering the earth. Ferocious beasts were crawling on their bellies. Even Feng Ting and the others had all fallen onto the ground. Sweat was unceasingly dripping from their foreheads. They had almost collapsed under the pressure. These people didn't know what the old man knew. They didn't know what was happening at all. They just felt like the ground was going to collapse and crumble under their feet. It was too terrifying. That oppressive sword energy made their entire bodies tremble. They didn't dare move, fearing that the celestial sword would kill them if they did. At that moment, Lin Feng also regained consciousness from his flash of enlightenment. He was amazed by the topographical changes that occurred. He would have never thought that when he regained consciousness from his flash of enlightenment, the sky and the ground would look so terrifying. Everybody, even hundreds of kilometers in the periphery, had the same feeling of dread. Lin Feng could also sense the oppressive qi. Besides, at the top of the mountain, the black clouds seemed to be forming directly above him, so he could sense the oppressive qi even more intensely and distinctly than everybody else. What's going on? Thought Lin Feng while a cold sweat dripped from his forehead. Lin Feng gazed into the distance and saw that the 9 mountains were unceasingly shaking and emitting a rumbling noise. These 9 sword mountains were all slowly starting to break in half. At the same time, in the sky above the 9 sword mountains, a sword illusion appeared in the middle of the black clouds. It was a dark and evil sword. What a terrifying strength! What a powerful and brutal evil energy! Thought Lin Feng, who was astonished. He was just under the black clouds and could distinctly sense the evil energy it contained. Wrath, humiliation, hatred and all sorts of evil energy was present, and they were all forming that evil sword. Boom! The mountains seemed to be exploding and the earth was splitting apart. Lin Feng was in a state of shock and violently shaking. The 9 mountains in front of him had suddenly exploded and were collapsing. Huge rocks were falling from the sky and creating whistling sounds as they fell to the earth. There were also some stones which were completely destroyed and turned into powder in the air. A sword, surprisingly, there were swords. Lin Feng's heart was pounding. The rocky surface of the 9 sword mountains had exploded, and in front of him appeared 9 gigantic swords. They were gigantic pitch-black swords that looked terrifyingly evil. They were facing the sky, but their terrifying evil energy was absolutely shocking. Not only Lin Feng but everybody else in the region remained frozen in their initial positions. In Xueyu, many people knew that there were 9 sword mountains in the 9-dragon mountain chain. They knew that by observing these mountains, sword cultivators could become stronger. Everybody knew that these mountains were special. They were filled with a sword cultivator's determination, but what nobody knew was that these 9 sword mountains surprisingly were 9 gigantic swords, and they knew even less that they were terrifying evil swords. At that moment, a deadly light was emerging from these 9 gigantic swords. In the deathly silence of the atmosphere, the 9 swords were shaking and emitting whistling sounds. The evil black clouds started rolling through the sky. Boom! The 9 evil swords rushed in the air and started to shrink. The energy was condensed into 9 normal-sized swords. Suddenly Lin Feng felt like his entire body was being oppressed by an incredible sword energy which prevented him from moving. His heart was violently pounding. Lin Feng had felt that these swords were alive and they were all staring at him. The dark swords suddenly fell from the sky and fell like meteors towards Lin Feng. Lin Feng was terrified when he saw this. What was going on? Why would these swords suddenly attack him? How could he resist the power of such terrifying swords? Lin Feng couldn't defend himself against these swords. They were too quick. They were so fast that it was unbelievable. Lin Feng had a look of hopeless despair on his face. The evil swords were moving towards him at full speed. A rumbling sound emerged in the atmosphere, and immediately after, Lin Feng blacked out. At the top of the mountain where he was standing, there was an incredibly deep crater. Lin Feng and the swords had disappeared into the depths of the mountain. Deep in the darkness there was no light at all. However, at that moment Lin Feng felt omniscient. Everything was much clearer and more distinct than usual. I'm not dead. Lin Feng was astonished. He reached out his hand and touched the wall. It felt cold. Lin Feng hadn't died because he could still feel his body. He was still alive, but the 9 swords. At that moment Lin Feng could sense the 9 swords. They had penetrated into his body. It felt like he could make it appear at any moment, as if the evil sword fused into his body. How could such a thing happen? Lin Feng felt like everything was a nightmare. When Ao Shui had told him about the mountain chain, which is why Lin Feng had come hoping to make a breakthrough. When Lin Feng sensed that the mountains were influencing him, he did not absorb their energy and instead he studied the sword of the rising sun, the scorching sword as well as the sword of the setting sun. Because he had a breakthrough when practicing his skill, he suddenly had a moment of enlightenment. He fell deeply into his sword dimension. But when he regained consciousness, everything outside was collapsing. The 9 sword mountains then exploded and revealed 9 evil swords which attacked him and fused with his body. Everything was too insane. Lin Feng felt like it was too insane for it to be reality. But this was reality. The evil sword had been confined for 1,000 years. It was weakened by a great deal. Over the years it had remained silent and never attempted to break the seal. But then Lin Feng spent days studying the sword mountains and seemed to have a breakthrough in his sword dimension. That was probably what attracted the evil sword, which then broke the seal and merged with Lin Feng's body. At that moment Lin Feng frowned. He could feel the evil sword was consuming his soul. Lin Feng immediately moved the evil sword inside his body, preventing it from having any contact with his soul. As expected, the evil sword calmed down after that and remained silent. It was very intriguing. That evil sword wasn't an ordinary sword. These 9 heavy swords had a life of their own. It seems like I should find a place to give these evil swords a try, thought Lin Feng, but he couldn't stay in these mountains. Lin Feng's silhouette flickered. He absorbed the sword energy and seemed to transform into a sword. He didn't move towards the sky, but instead he moved towards the ground. A subtle crackling sound was spreading through the atmosphere. Lin Feng had cut into the mountain and traveled through the interior of the mountain. After a short period of time, Lin Feng finally emerged from the mountain. At that moment, the black evil clouds had already vanished. The terrifying oppressive sword energy had disappeared as well. But the landscape was suddenly lonely and desolate. Lin Feng was astonished. The 9 sword mountains had completely disappeared. After the swords disappeared, a terrifying pure qi invaded the entire area. That's Lin Feng's pupils shrank. After the 9-sword mountains had collapsed, the pure qi heaven and earth burst out. It was extremely dense. Even if Lin Feng wasn't close, he could still perfectly sense that extremely dense pure qi. That's Lin Feng's pupils shrank. After the 9-sword mountains had collapsed, the pure qi heaven and earth burst out. It was extremely dense. Even if Lin Feng wasn't close, he could still perfectly sense that extremely dense pure qi, a vein of pure qi. It's a huge well of pure qi. Lin Feng was astonished. That pure qi had been accumulating throughout the years to the extent that it would condense into purity stones. More and more purity stones were appearing, and it looked like it formed a purity stone mine. Besides, the 9 evil swords were monstrously strong. They had been there for so many years. They were able to bathe in pure qi all this time. No wonder they were so strong. What excited Lin Feng was that nobody had ever suspected that in the 9-dragon mountain chain, under these 9-sword mountains, there were such precious natural resource, a priceless treasure. Besides, Lin Feng was the first to find it. Thus, he would be able to mine purity stones and extract the pure qi. No. A moment ago, the evil swords caused some mini tremors. They terrified and scared away a lot of people. Very quickly, people will come back and find out that this place is a well of pure qi. Lin Feng didn't get too excited. He knew that in such situations, he had to stay clear-headed. A well of pure qi was priceless. Besides, it contained a myriad of treasures. If it was found by someone else, they would fight Lin Feng for ownership of it. Even those who called each other brother amongst the noble clans, they would still fight each other over the qi vein. At the Celestial Academy, there were 4 wells of pure qi. They had constructed the 4 cultivation towers above them. It was thus clear how precious and valuable pure qi was. I will not be able to seize that well, thought Lin Feng. Lin Feng saw how thick and rich the pure qi was. It was obviously huge. It would attract many people and lead to a war. Lin Feng didn't have the power to seize it. When Lin Feng thought about that, his silhouette flickered and he streaked through the sky towards the well of pure qi. At the same time, he started using the acute senses from the earth fusion. Everything that surrounded him could be clearly sensed by him. In a flash, Lin Feng arrived at the place where the 9-sword mountains were destroyed. Pure qi was floating above the ground like a mist. Lin Feng released an incredible quantity of sword energy. A sword formed of pure qi flashed, and started unceasingly absorbing the pure qi. Lin Feng's body transformed into a sword and immediately penetrated deep into the qi well. He opened his Na stone on his ring and stored all the purity stones inside. Even if he couldn't absorb all the pure qi of the well, he could at least pick up the treasures inside, especially since he was the one who discovered it. It contained so many precious treasures. Cultivators would never refuse purity stones. Even if they didn't use them, they could also exchange them for other things. Purity stones was the basic currency of a cultivator. So many, there isn't even enough space in my Na stone. Very quickly Lin Feng looked satisfied. That well of pure qi was shocking. It was filled purity stones. Stones of lower quality were numerous, but they were mixed with purity stones of average quality as well. It was so insane that here and there, Lin Feng even found some precious dazzling treasures, purity stones of higher quality. One purity stone of higher quality was equivalent to 10,000 purity stones of lower quality. It was incomparable. I don't want those of lower quality, decided Lin Feng. The space in his Na stone was limited. If he used it all for purity stones of lower quality, he wouldn't have enough space for purity stones of average quality. Besides, he didn't have to be worried about the well not having enough purity stones of average quality. Therefore, Lin Feng had decided to abandon the purity stones of lower quality. That way he would be able to collect the greatest value. Lin Feng had made a fortune. That place existed for thousands of years, and it was the first time that Lin Feng had accumulated such wealth. Being rich was a marvelous feeling. Lin Feng would be able to give these purity stones to his Qixia troops to use for their cultivation. It would be extremely beneficial to them. Lin Feng would be able to create a monstrously powerful army. Lin Feng surpassed many geniuses of his age. He had no social background, no influence, and relied only on himself. Because of that, he was constructing his own sphere of influence. Lu Zonglan had given him the Qixia army precisely for that purpose. Lin Feng was moving through the vein of the earth at full speed, picking up the highest quality purity stones. What's this? At that moment Lin Feng suddenly discovered a precious treasure. It had 9 leaves that were diffusing a bright white light. It was rich with sun qi and was close to the ground. 9 sungrass. Lin Feng's pupils shrank. Indeed, that energy was that of the 9 sungrass. 9 sungrass had 9 petals which absorbed sun qi and condensed it. Pure qi of heaven and earth as well as sun qi all were extremely beneficial to cultivators. Besides, they had to mature for many years and the probability of them reaching maturity was extremely low. The 9 sungrass had been in the middle of these evil swords for so many years, and had absorbed sun qi and pure qi. All this made it perfect growing conditions. You can wear out iron shoes in fruitless searching, and yet find what you are looking for when you have stopped searching. Lin Feng immediately thought this expression was appropriate to describe the situation he was in. He needed 9 sungrass and it had suddenly appeared in front of him when he wasn't looking for it. His silhouette flickered and he started picking up the 9 sungrass which he put inside of his Na stone. To store this grass, Lin Feng separated a special place in the stone. Lin Feng was acting and reacting. He meticulously searched for more 9 sungrass. Lin Feng didn't know precisely how much pure qi it contained, but it was a real treasure. As expected, there is even more, smiled Lin Feng. His smile was resplendent. That place contains so much 9 sungrass, there might even be a second place where there is more, and then a third place. Anything is possible. At that moment, some people appeared from the distance. It was Feng Ting and the others. When they sensed the extremely dense and rich pure qi, they stopped and immediately looked delighted. Surprisingly, there was a well of pure qi there. They were growing more excited. There was a vein of the earth. Did they need to remain the protectors of a clan? They could become extremely rich and grab a fortune of purity stones. So many purity stones, said a voice amongst the people. Immediately after, people's silhouettes started flickering, and they rushed towards the well and started picking up purity stones. At that moment they didn't care about anything else. All they could see were purity stones, an endless stream of purity stones. Everybody stop! Shouted the old man furiously next to Feng Ting when he saw all the guards going crazy. What are you doing? Said Feng Ting angrily as well, but everybody ignored her. These guards only looked at her and the old man in a cold and detached way. Immediately after, they continued stealing purity stones, ignoring them. Didn't you hear Xiao? Shouted the old man furiously while releasing an ice-cold energy. Xiao? If we became guards of your Feng clan, it's only because we needed purity stones. Now that we have purity stones, why would we need to listen to her? What does she intend to do? But against all expectations, she looks pretty good. Wait until we're done picking up purity stones and then we'll have some fun together, said a strong guard with an evil voice. He was fixedly staring at Feng Ting, especially at her voluptuous chest. The man's eyes were filled with lust. When the other guards who were picking up purity stones heard him, they all burst into laughter. She was ridiculous. Feng Ting turned deathly pale. What a bunch of bastards! Besides, the old man's heart was also pounding, but they were both utterly helpless. Xiao, let's pick up purity stones as well, said the old man. Feng Ting nodded and they both started picking up purity stones as they could no longer count on the guards. Xiao, look over there. At that moment, while picking up purity stones, the old man's pupils shrank. He had seen something on the ground. It was twinkling. 9 sungrass, it's 9 sungrass. Feng Ting was astonished. She shivered from head to toe. Indeed, it's 9 sungrass. Xiao, grab it quickly, said the old man in a quiet voice. Feng Ting nodded and walked towards the grass. She stretched her little hand towards the 9 sungrass, but her arm was too short to reach it. 7. At that moment, a voice suddenly emerged in the atmosphere. Feng Ting hadn't managed to grab anything, but at that moment, the 9 sungrass immediately disappeared. At the same time, a silhouette flashed past her. 7. Said Lin Feng while looking at the 9 sungrass in his hand. He was smiling wholeheartedly. He then stored it into his ring. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.